Chapter 71, Different Than Intended, 3. Kale could hear Tunka shout with an excited expression on his face. Get it ready right away. Suddenly, an arena for the battle began to form in the center. There was nothing special about it. The citizens who went crazy for battle moved some of the tents near the training ground to create a larger area for the battle. Weak human, the chubby human is staring at you. Kale turned his gaze after hearing Rayon's voice. Billows was staring at Kale from a distance. Kale casually made a shooing motion toward Billows. The chiefs were next to Billows, but now was not the time to worry about it. Kale turned his gaze to the front as a shadow appeared in front of him. I will guide you to the front. It was the large woman, Pelia, Tunka's left arm and a master of the spear. She pointed toward the front of the audience section of the arena. His expression immediately stiffened. There is no need to do that. Kale did not want to be at the closest place to the arena at all. He would be the first to die if Tunka is sent flying or Choi Han accidentally launches his aura toward the wrong spot. We have to give you the best spot. As Pelia said that and looked forward, Kale could see the soldiers create a path to the center of the arena. It was a miracle for such wild people to be so coordinated. Pelia really deserved her position as vice general. Kale sighed and followed the path to the front of the arena. He had already hidden his dominating aura, but Pelia and the soldiers could not take their eyes off of Kale. His slow pace made it seem like he was on a casual stroll, while the young man and woman walking behind him looked dangerous. Why are you going to a dangerous place? You cannot do this because you are weak. It does not matter if you have become as strong as the tip of my claw. But Kale was just walking slowly because he did not want to go. He couldn't do anything about Rayon's nagging. Rosalind and Locke did not look good following behind Kale as well. Young Master Kale. What is it? Rosalind cautiously looked toward the arena where Choi Han and Tunka would fight against each other. What if this makes them hate us? Hate. Kale's eyes were full of confusion. Locke then approached Kale and started to whisper. As Nuna mentioned, wouldn't it be bad if Choi Han Hyung ends up winning? What if they get angry? Don't you think Tunka would be angry and decide not to trade with us? Neither Rosalind nor Locke had any doubts about Choi Han winning. This was the same for Kale. However, Kale was thinking a little differently than the two of them. Kale slowly sat down on the chairs that were provided for the high-ranking officials. He then pointed to the seats on either side of him for the two people still standing. Are you going to stand the whole time? Rosalind and Locke sat in the chairs with concern still on their faces. Then Kale's voice reached their ears. There is no need to worry. Tunka was not that strong. Of course, he was strong compared to the average person, but he was outrageously weak compared to whales and dragons. However, Tunka would never have come to this position if he had suffered after meeting a stronger being and vowed revenge on all of them. He was not the only one who was like that. Just look around. Rosalind turned her gaze as Kale pointed to the open space. It was at that moment. Woo! 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 Voices echoed in the wide open space. The shouts of the soldiers around the arena rang in Rosalind's ears. There was more. Boom. 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 The sound of the citizens stomping their feet filled the area. Locke, who had been watching, could feel the vibrations underneath his feet. Once the citizens started to stomp, the soldiers and knights all started to stomp as well. Woo. 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 Boom. 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 And that noise gradually grew louder. It seemed like the earth itself was shouting. Young Master. What is going on? The timid Locke looked at Kale with a pale expression. He could see Kale smiling. He answered for both Locke and Rosalind. Winning or losing does not matter to them. At that time, Pelia came near Kale to sit behind him. She also heard what Kale had to say. The warrior's ritual. She stopped sitting down and looked at Kale, who continued to look forward without noticing Pelia's reaction. The two warriors slowly made their way into the arena. Choi Han and Tunka. Kale continued to speak while looking at the two of them. To fight. For Tunka's people, victory or defeat was not important. Fighting was the only thing that mattered. In particular, if the opponent was not an enemy, the fighting between warriors was rather sacred. Only that is important. Kale finished speaking and leaned over the back of the chair as much as possible. He was afraid of getting hurt after seeing Tunka and Choi Han entering the arena. At that time, he heard Rayon's voice. "Do not worry, weak human. I am stronger than the two of them. You will not get hurt." It was a voice filled with pity. Kale did not like the tone of Rayon's voice, so he continued to lean back before turning around. "What is it?" "It is nothing." Kale saw that Pelia was sitting down and turned his gaze forward. He then also sat up straight. He didn't want Pelia, who was loyal to Tunka, to get angry for his casual demeanor. "Yes. Do not sit like a wimp and sit up proudly. Human, you are doing well." Kale ignored Rayon's ramblings as he observed Hoda, one of Tunka's other subordinates, stepping forward as referee. Not that they really need one. Until your opponent faints or gives up. That was the rule of these people. Fainting in such a battle was embarrassing for these people. "Young master, I don't need to worry." "Yes, you can just relax, Miss Rosalind." Kale responded to Rosalind's question and watched Hoda start to shout in order to get people's attention. He then blew a small flute. Beep dash. The battle had begun. It would be nice if they ran toward each other right away, but Choi Han and Tunka both continued to stare at each other without moving. Kale watched this without thinking much about it. At that moment, he could hear Tunka's voice. The arena was large, but since they were in the front, it was not difficult to hear their voices. It also helped that Tunka had a very loud voice. "Why do you care about what the weakling thinks?" The weakling. Kale felt like it was referring to him. "Choi Han is wary of me." "Why?" Kale had a question, but could not think of it any longer. It was because Rosalind and Locke kept peeking his way. Tunka definitely was referring to him when he said weakling. Choi Han's voice could be heard at that time. "What did you just say?" His voice was very low. Kale could see the mocking smile on Tunka's face. "I said, why do you care what the weakling thinks? The weaklings are the first to die in any battlefield. I'm sure you know that." Rosalind and Locke started to frown. At that moment, the two of them heard something in their ears. Sigh. Kale's sigh made Locke shut up. Locke's claws were becoming sharper and slowly getting longer. Rosalind brushed her face with her fingers. However, the two of them soon stopped moving. "Poor bastard. Poor bastard." The two of them both had confusion on their faces as they looked toward Kale. Kale had a blank expression as if he had never sighed in the first place as he looked toward the arena. The Choi Han that Kale knew had been transported to the hell known as the Forest of Darkness when he was just a sophomore in high school. He was the weakest existence in that forest for the longest time. Kale felt bad for Tunka, who was telling such a person that the weakest would be the first to die. "Young Master Kale, who are you calling a poor dash? Just take a look for yourself." Kale pointed to the arena instead of answering Rosalind. At that moment, Choi Han took the sword strap off of his waist. The sword flew out of the corner of the arena once Choi Han threw it in the air. Plop. Kale could hear the sound of the sword falling to the ground, but he just nodded his head as he started to mumble. "It's definitely better to beat someone up with your bare hands." Locke and Rosalind both flinched and watched as Kale's words became reality. Wham! Ugh! Rosalind could now tell who Kale was calling a poor bastard. Pow! Pow! Boom! Boom! The arena was silent. Nobody could talk. However, Rayon's voice was going off in Kale's head. "He's being beaten to a pulp." Rayon was correct. Choi Han was beating Tunka up without holding anything back. "Ugh, you bastard!" Tunka moved very quickly for someone his size as he rushed toward Choi Han and threw a punch. Pang! It made a cute noise as Choi Han blocked it with his palm. Choi Han then closed his fist around Tunka's hand as he darted toward Tunka. All of this happened in an instant. Kale could not see past that point. However, he could hear it. Boom! Tunka's body was flung to the ground. The arena was filled with dust from the impact. Ugh! Tunka was having a difficult time breathing. However, Kale could see that Tunka was still smiling. Great! This strength! A battle of St. Ugh! You talk too much. However, Choi Han did not allow Tunka to keep smiling. Kale could see Tunka raise his arms in an attempt to block Choi Han's attack, but Choi Han's kick still flung Tunka into the air. Ugh! Ha ha ha! Tunka was laughing even as he was sent flying. He then twisted his body and tried to attack again. However, the results were the same. He ended up getting beaten again and again. All Kale could see was Tunka's bloodied clothes, his face that was slowly getting swollen to the point that they couldn't even tell it was Tunka, and the dust that was consistently being kicked up into the air. Hee hee, I will not fall. Tunka got up while staggering to the side. At that moment, Kale could hear Rayon's serious voice. Why is he laughing after getting hit? Does he enjoy getting hit? 1. Kale looked up toward the sky. However, he could still hear what sounded like a punching bag being beaten up. There was no way that Choi Han, someone who could fight against the whales, would not be able to beat Tunka up easily. Only Choi Han had the strength to fight against both Rayon and the Whale King, Schickler. He really deserved his title of the main character. Pow! Pow! Kale continued to look up at the sky with curiosity. When will Choi Han finish beating Tunka up? Wasn't it about time for Tunka to run out of strength? However, Tunka was just too strong. Young Master Kale, shouldn't we stop Choi Han? Kale gave a short response to Rosalind's cautious question. We cannot get involved in the warrior's ritual. It can only end with the will of one of the warriors. All we can do is watch this sacred ritual from the side. Kale did not know that all of the high-ranking warriors were looking at him as he said that. He just looked back down after hearing another punching noise followed by a bang. He, you are a really strong bastard. Spit. Tunka spit out some blood and continued to laugh. Choi Han looked toward him with disgust. It looked like Choi Han had realized how crazy Tunka was. He would continue to smile no matter how much he was beaten up. He will stand back up even after being beaten to a pulp repeatedly. He would never give up. He seemed like a character out of a children's cartoon. That is why he is such a crazy bastard. Kale could see Tunka's morale starting to go down. He could not even tell whether Tunka even had his eyes open anymore. Tunka looked terrible as he let out a shout and rushed forward once more. Ah! Tunka then started to fly away. Looks like he is blasting off. Tunka was flung high into the sky. Choi Han's half-transparent black aura had sent Tunka soaring into the air. Ha! Dodge. Everybody move. The soldiers rushed backward in order to dodge Tunka's body as Tunka came flying their way. Boom. A large ditch was formed as if a meteor had struck down and caused an explosion. Tunka had fainted inside this ditch. Fainting was what Tunka found to be the most embarrassing. Choi Han walked over to Kale like he didn't even need to check on Tunka. Kale quickly got up, as if this was the moment he had been waiting for the entire battle. Rosalind and Locke, who also got up at that moment, started to flinch. This was the same for Tunka's subordinates who were heading toward Tunka. That feeling they had gotten earlier. That gentle yet anxiety-provoking feeling. Kale reached his hand out to Choi Han who had approached him. Good job. Yes, Kale Nim. Choi Han grabbed Kale's hand and started to smile. Kale surrounded his body with the dominating aura before looking around. The gaze that Tunka's companions gave Choi Han and himself was worlds apart from the original gaze that Tunka's group had given them when they had arrived. Kale had a smile on his face. Now it was set up properly. It was set up exactly as Kale had wanted. Tap. Tap. Tunka woke up from someone tapping on his cheeks. Pelia was waking him up. However, Tunka was looking at Kale who was behind her. Kale looked down at the collapsed Tunka as he started to speak. Take me to the magic tower. Chapter 72, Different Than Intended, 4. Kale could see the change in Tunka's expression. He blankly blinked a few times before slowly starting to frown as if he remembered what had happened. I lost. However, he was calm when he started to speak. Kale then proceeded to speak. It was still a warrior's battle. Tunka blankly stared at Kale before slowly starting to smile. He looked extremely ugly with that expression on his face. His face, that already looked like an orc's because of the beating he had just received, now looked like a mutant troll's face. It was full of blue bruises. Kale turned away to stop seeing that ugly face. He could hear Tunka starting to speak as he turned. Tunka was speaking to Pelia. A new warrior has appeared today. Kale could see soldiers approaching them after hearing Tunka's loud voice. There was anticipation on the faces of the citizens. They did not seem to look down on their leader for fainting or have any animosity toward Choi Han for beating up their leader. Warrior. It was a cool title that was incomparable to those stupid mages. Someone who deserved such a title had appeared. We will have a celebration tonight. Get it prepared. Boom. 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 The citizens started to stomp their feet again. At the same time, they cheered for both Choi Han and Tunka. Although these citizens were called barbarians because of such actions, Kale did not care. Of course, there will definitely be some soldiers whose morale goes down because Tunka lost, as well as some high-ranking people who will have animosity toward Kale's crew. Not my concern. He just needed to take what he needed to take. Kale could hear Tunka speaking to Choi Han behind him. Warrior. I will definitely kill you next time. Muhahahahaha. Kale turned around to see Choi Han frowning deeply. Choi Han had deeply disliked Tunka in the novel. He then heard Tunka speaking to him. I destroyed it less, per our agreement. It meant they were now going to go look at the magic tower. Kale climbed back up and patted the pale Billows' shoulder. Billows. Yes, sir. Go get everybody from outside the base. Billows seemed confused, but accepted before pointing to someone else. Of course. But there is someone I need to introduce first. Kale looked toward who Billows was pointing at. Brown hair and brown eyes along with an extremely average face. He seemed so common and average, but it was so much so that it made him look unique. Young Master Nim, this is Chief Harrel Nim. He is currently the supreme chief in charge of the entire faction. Harrel. He was a necessary member of the non-mage faction. Nice to meet you, young Master Kale Nim. My name is Harrel. The peasants of the Whipper Kingdom did not have last names. Kale reached his hand out to Harrel. Nice to meet you. I am Kale. Harrel cautiously shook Kale's hand before quietly starting to whisper. I guess young Master Kale Nim is who our leader Tunka Nim said he was going to sell the magic tower to. Kale did not say anything and just smiled as he let go of Harrel's hand. Harrel. Harrel was neither a very strategic person nor a strong individual. He also did not have any unique abilities. He was a great scientist, but he was lacking compared to the other chiefs. However, he was one of the founding members of the non-mage faction. The mages had considered themselves above the regular citizens because of their magic abilities. Harrel had been the one who had brought up the idea of saving the people from such tyranny. To them, he was a hero. People followed him because of how average he was. Tunka and Harrel, this combination was the hope for the Whipper Kingdom citizens. It is my honor to meet you. I guess we have a lot to discuss from here on. The non-mage faction needed money. Harrel probably wanted to take as much money as possible from Kale. At that moment, Kale could hear Rayon's voice in his head. What a liar. The dragon really was sharp. Kale gently responded to Harrel. I suppose so. An unfair trade. That trade started from Harrel and not Tunka. Kale stood in front of the magic tower and looked up. The 20-story magic tower was the second tallest building on the entire continent. The tallest building was the Empire's Alchemist Bell Tower. It's better than I expected. Tunka had destroyed the magic tower less than Kale had anticipated. There were only a few outer walls that were destroyed. In comparison, all the windows and the insides were a total mess. This isn't all there is to the magic tower. Kale turned away from the magic tower to look at Tunka. Are you going in as well? The question made Tunka start to frown. You think I am crazy? Why would I go into that dirty place? Dirty place. Tunka was calling this famous building that was known throughout the Western continent a dirty place. It was dirty to him because the citizens' blood, sweat, and tears were shed inside of this building. Harrel will guide you. Tunka said that before peeking toward Beecrox, Hillsman, the Wolf Children, and Locke. It was because he smelled strong scents from them as well. He then also peeked toward the two baby kittens in Kale's arms. He then looked toward Choi Han, who was talking to Rosalind, before casually starting to speak. You are interesting because you are weak. Kale naturally ignored Tunka, however, Tunka continued to speak. A weakling who oddly seems strong. However, Tunka could not say anything else. It was because Choi Han had started to stare at him. Tunka started to smile brightly at Choi Han's stare before he started to approach him. What? You want to fight again? Choi Han sighed before ignoring Tunka. Kale observed Tunka and Choi Han's interaction before taking a look at Billows and Harold discussing with one another. He then started petting the kittens in his arms while starting to quietly sing. Let's catch a rat, let's catch a rat. How many rats? On's front paw moved in Kale's arms. Tap. She hit him once. Kale continued to speak. Don't hurt him though. Life is precious. Hong snorted before moving his front paw. Tap. Tap. He tapped twice before his tail started to wag. On started to shake her head after seeing the smiles on Kale and Hong's faces. The two of their villainous smiles were becoming similar the longer they were together. However, On's tail was shaking as well. At that moment, a stealthy voice filled Kale's mind. Should I come with you too, human? Rayon really must want to go with them, as he even asked Kale for permission. Kale sternly shook his head. Kale quietly whispered as if he was gently speaking to the kittens. You have to catch something else with me. The baby kittens and Black Dragon all closed their mouths after seeing Kale's expression as he said, something else. That sounded fun as well. Harold and Tunka soon approached Kale. Tunka pointed to Harold with friendliness. Our chief will guide you. Pelia will go with you as well. Pelia was going to be Harold's guard. Kale nodded his head and asked. Did you clean up the corpses of the mages in the tower? I left a few there. Kale knew this would be the case and kept a straight face. At that moment, Rayon started to speak. I guess you are only afraid of mermaid corpses. Don't worry, I will make sure the mermaids can't get to you in the future. I'm not really afraid of the mermaids either. However, Kale did not say that out loud since he should not run into any mermaids in the future. Tunka observed Kale's calm demeanor before continuing to speak. Those bastards do not need their souls consoled. The consolation of the soul referred to cremation. The citizens burned mage corpses whenever possible. Of course, there were some corpses with their heads rolling around on the ground, but those corpses would soon be burnt as well. However, there must be a reason for the corpses they left behind not to be burnt. Probably the ones that killed the most citizens. What do you need the most of to advance magic devices? Experiments. What would they experiment on? People. There were many mages who performed experiments on humans in secret. I plan on getting rid of them when there are no more mages left in this kingdom. There will be no traces of them left. Tunka quietly mumbled, contrary to his usual self. However, Kale did not pay much attention to his words. Although all of the mages in the tower were dead, not all of the mages in the Whipper Kingdom were dead. The Mage Tower mages were all part of the mage faction. They were hierarchical and greedy. A tower is naturally going to have a top and a bottom. The people on top enjoyed looking down on the people down below. However, there were some mages who stayed far away from power and greed. They preferred not to take part in politics or anything of power. Those mages were currently in hiding, trying to find a way out of the Whipper Kingdom, as well as trying to determine where to go. Crown Prince Alberu Crossman would be their shield. Alberu will gather together the mages who are only interested in magic research under his wings. Kale then asked Tunka. Can I go in? Kale put the two kittens in his arms down on the ground. They will stealthily investigate on their own as long as the entrance door remains open. Beacrox and Choi Han stood behind Kale. Seeing Beacrox there, Kale had a confused expression on his face. However, Beacrox was looking toward the still bruised and battered Tunka with disgust. Harold. Yes, Leader Nim. Young Master Kale Nim, I will guide you. Screech. The magic tower's door opened and Kale started to frown. He casually started to speak to Harold and Tunka, who were both looking at him. The rotten stench is strong. The first floor of the magic tower. As soon as the door opened, Kale could see a corpse wearing the golden robe that symbolized the liege of the magic tower, as well as the destroyed remains of the devices inside. Kale started to speak with disgust at the crazy people who caused all this. Leave the door open to ventilate. I can't stand this type of smell. He then started to speak to Tunka. And cover the corpse. I'm a weakling, so I can't stand looking at a corpse for long. Tunka snorted, but still motioned to a soldier guarding the entrance. Kale verified the pale, yet calm Rosalind, before leaving her and the others behind and entering the magic tower. Choi Han quickly stood in front of him with Beacrocs behind him. Shall I guide you floor by floor? Chief Harrell. Yes. The top. There was no reason to look anywhere else. The top. I'm curious about what it feels like to look down from the top. The liege's room. Let's go there. I understand. They got on the elevator, the only device that was still functioning in the magic tower. It would instantly take them up to the 20th floor. You somehow managed to not break this. Just in case we needed it. Harold gently responded, but Kale had to hold back his snort. Boom. The only remaining magic device in the magic tower started to move with a gentle vibration. The platform that Kale and crew were standing on slowly started to move up. It finally stopped once they got to the top of the magic tower. Kale looked at the single door on the top floor and started to speak. Is that the liege's room? Yes, it is. Ah, young Master Nim. Kale did not respond to Harold's call and started to walk. The others quickly followed behind him. Kale walked to the door and turned the knob. Click. The door opened and the liege's room revealed itself. What a mess. Kale's blunt assessment was heard by everyone else. An area as wide as an entire floor was in front of them. It definitely was a mess. Everything inside the liege's room was destroyed. There was also blood everywhere. It looked like they had splashed blood around the room on purpose. A total mess. Chief Harrell, can I go to that window over there? The only symbol of the liege's room. The only undestroyed thing remaining in this room was the view from that large window. Of course. Let me guide you there. I want to think in silence. Can I go alone? That is a bit. Seeing Harold looking uncomfortable, Choi Han moved away from the liege's room and stood in front of the elevator. I will be right here. Beacrocs went and stood next to Choi Han as well. He looked thankful that he did not need to go into such a dirty and messy place. However, Pelia was still uncomfortable. Nevertheless, Harold had made up his mind and started to speak. Pelia Nim, I will guide young Master Kale Nim over there. Will 5 minutes alone with me be fine, young Master Nim? Of course. Keep one door open. That way, she can feel at ease. Thank you very much. Kale returned Pelia's thanks with a smile. The liege's room had a double door entrance. They kept one of them open as Kale entered the room. The 20th floor. The liege's room was very wide as the liege had occupied the entire floor for himself. That was why most people would not be able to hear Kale's voice once they got to the window at the edge of the room. Choi Han might be able to hear it, but it doesn't matter if he does. Kale crossed through the destroyed items in the room. Tables, chairs, books, carpets, everything was now trash. Kale stood in front of the window that was the furthest away from the door and started to speak. You broke everything. Harold confidently responded to Kale's question. Of course. This was the room of the worst person in the magic tower. This was the room of a monster made from mana. A monster made from mana. This was what the warriors used when referring to mages. What a liar. Rayon was grumbling in disbelief, but Kale did not care. Instead, he started to whisper in Harold's ear. He was talking about Harold's secret that nobody else knew about. You say that, but you are a mage as well. He could feel mana, but his heart resisted mana. He was a mixed child of a mage and a magic-resistant person. The unluckiest of all mana users. The secret of a person's birth was quite common in this world. Chief Harold, no. Kale put his hand on the completely pale Harold and called out to him. Harold Kodiang. The phrase about how a smart person going crazy was scary definitely was referring to Harold Kodiang. Don't you want to erase all traces of your father? The Liege of the Magic Tower, Peester Kodiang, did not know about Harel. This was a child who was born without his knowledge. A true monster that the monster made from mana had created. How did you know? Kale gently responded to the monster who asked him that question with a bitter smile on his face. Let me hear your answer first. He didn't need to say something like how he was going to buy the magic tower. Instead, Kale spoke about what he knew to be Harel's desire. I will get rid of the magic tower for you. What do you think? Chapter 73, Different Than Intended, 5. How did you know? The mana told me. Harel had a twisted smile on his face after hearing Kale's answer. The mana told me. That was the phrase that was quite famous for being the Magic Tower's liege's favorite phrase. Harel Kodiang. He was born between a mage and a magic-resistant citizen, and he had the unique traits of both sides. However, his appearance did not look anything like the citizens at all. Are you planning on using my bloodline as blackmail? Kale looked down from the 20th floor instead of responding to the question right away. There were a lot of memorable extra characters in The Birth of a Hero. Harel Kodiang was one of them. His mother passed away while giving birth to him alone, and his father did not even know of his existence. That was the start of Harel's anger. However, there was something Harel did not know. It was something only the author and the readers would know. That one line was enough to make Harel's anger worthless. The novel did not go into detail about it. All it said was that the Liege of the Magic Tower met her when he was out training as a young mage and fell in love. Kale continued to look out the window before speaking to the son of the Magic Tower's liege, who ended up destroying the Magic Tower. Why would I use it to blackmail you? Being related to someone by blood is not a sin. Harel did not have a response. Kale turned his head to look at Harel. Plus, aren't you all the ones who are in a rush? They were currently between spring and summer, with the fall harvest season right in front of them. All of them had rebelled against the Magic Tower because they could not handle the taxation of the Magic Tower any longer. Harel needed to fill the people's desire in order for them to rise up once again. In fact, Harel was someone who wanted war even more than Tunka did. He wanted to destroy the seeds of mages in the entire world. There is a mage within your crew. Yes, there is. Harel could feel mana like his father, but could not use it. There was no way he wouldn't know that Rosalind was a mage. Of course, the reason that he couldn't feel Rayon's presence was because his skills were too weak. Harel could see how calm and confident Kale was and decided to ask. What is the Roan Kingdom planning to do with the Magic Tower? Kale started to frown as he made it very clear to Harel. The Magic Tower is mine. Harel observed the red-haired man who spoke confidently while looking out the window. I do not share my things with anyone else. He would have to be crazy to give this to the kingdom. Kale thought about all of the time he spent to get here. There was no way he would give this up. The Magic Tower would become an ingredient for him to create the sturdiest castle for his territory. Kale could see that Harel's eyes were filled with complications and confusion. He probably is going through all sorts of scenarios in his head because he is so smart. The final goal of this crazy bastard was to destroy all mages in the world. Harel respected and hoped for a world where everyone just relied on their strength or things like ancient powers. It was funny, since the world Harel was trying to create would be even worse when it came to comparisons between the people who had abilities and the people who did not. That was why Kale called him a crazy bastard. Young Master Kale, is it not that you want the mages of the Whipper Kingdom? Me. Kale scoffed to show that he was being honest when he answered. He already had Rayon Miru, the Black Dragon, with him. I do not need any more mages around me. An even greater existence is by my side. Human, I like the view from up here. The great Rayon is right here, human. Kale could hear Rayon's voice, but he paid no attention to it. Harel had a complicated expression on his face. Kale was planning on sending the mages to the Crown Prince anyways. He didn't care about whether Harel figured this out or not. He wasn't lying, since he personally would not take those mages under his wing. Of course, I will give some help to the Crown Prince. By some, he meant a lot of help to make sure that the mages ended up with the Crown Prince. All right, Chief Harel Kodiang. Harel could see that Kale seemed to have no worries at all. He pointed to the door. It was at that moment. Kale Nim, it has been 5 minutes. Their alone time was over. Choi Han looked through the open door and announced the end of the time before adding on. And other people have arrived as well. Other people. While Harold looked confused, Kale started to speak. You can hear the details from my people. 2 people entered through the open door as soon as he said that. It was Billows and Deputy Butler Hans. Hans had a large bag of files in his arms. Why had Kale called Billows and Hans to come with him? It was naturally in order to put them to use. Harold could feel Kale's hand on his shoulder. Tap. Tap. Kale lightly tapped Harold's shoulder before continuing to speak. Have a nice discussion. Harold started to laugh at Kale's calm voice before returning to his usual gentle expression. I definitely will. Harold gave that short response before quickly heading over to Billows and Hans. Billows walked over to Kale while Hans and Harold were discussing. He then cautiously started to whisper. Young Master Nim. What? Should I make the deal under my name for now? The transfer of funds was completed with Billows as the middleman. Billows would take Kale's money and deliver it to the non-mage faction. It was because of the difference in currencies and such. Of course, Billows would be taking the crown's money and not Kale's, but the non-mage faction had no way of knowing about that. Yes. Then I will leave a deposit and deliver the rest of the money within a month. You take care of it. But I do have a question. Kale could see Billows licking his lips. It looked so gross that Kale motioned with his chin for Billows to hurry up and speak. That, you see, how much were you thinking of spending? The Great Magic Tower held a lot of history within its walls. Everyone else believed that all of the devices except the elevator were completely destroyed. The citizens of the Whipper Kingdom also hated this building. Kale put up one finger in front of Billows. Billows seemed confused after looking at the finger before cautiously asking. 100 million. No. 1 billion. Kale did not respond. 10 billion. Kale nodded his head at the cautious question. Take care of it within that range. It seemed small compared to the tens of billions of gallons that went into feeding the army per month, but the non-mage faction needed money urgently to settle the needs of the citizens. The same amount of money could have different values based on the needs of the people. Furthermore, it was the Crown Prince's money and not Kale's money anyway. Billows started to frown as he quietly, but quickly, started to whisper. But it is all destroyed. Well, the original magic tower would take more than even 100 billion gallons to purchase, but none of the magic devices even work right now. That is why it is a maximum of 10 billion gallons. Bring the cost down using the fact that it is just a skeleton of what it used to be. Oh, and you can use more money, so buy a good chunk of the nearby land as well. Excuse me. There is something that we can sell that is worth the cost of this magic tower. A short period of silence filled the area. Sigh. Billows let out a deep sigh. I have no idea what you are planning, but I guess we should always aim to generate the most profit. Of course. Then I will do what I can. Kale started to smile after hearing such a satisfactory answer. Billows seemed to be at a loss of words, but still barely managed to smile back. My heart is shaking after hearing such large amounts of money, young Master Nim. I'm sure it is beating with joy. Billows did not retort Kale's response. He respectfully bowed before leisurely walking back toward Harold. The non-mage faction had no use for the magic tower and instead needed to do something big like destroying the magic tower to satisfy the citizens. Since it was going to be worthless anyway, they might as well make some money off of it. Kale Nim. Choi Han and Beacrox approached Kale. Beacrox looked around the room before asking. Are you going to clean it once you buy it? Kale gently responded to Beacrox's question. I'm going to get rid of everything. The moment Beacrox let out a sigh of relief, Kale stopped leaning on the windowsill and started to walk away. There was no need to look at anything else right now. He would be back at night anyway. There was a big frown on Kale's face. He could hear Tunka responding to him. You don't feel well? Yes. Tunka started to frown at Kale's nonchalant answer. The surroundings were very loud. The citizens were enjoying the celebration to welcome a new warrior. Tunka knew of their current financial situation, but this was more important to him. He needed to use the warrior name to draw people to them. That was why the chiefs had agreed to this dinner celebration. You weakling. Tunka seemed to be disgusted, but it was hidden through his swollen face. Kale just pointed to Choi Han. The main character for the celebration is still available, so it shouldn't be a problem. I need to rest because I am a weakling. Although Choi Han did not seem to like it, Kale lightly pushed him toward Tunka and crew. Naturally, Hillsman was with Choi Han as well. Ha ha ha. I can feel the will of the Whipper Kingdom's warriors. A celebration. This is great. The vice captain really was good at socializing. Then goodbye. Kale left the celebration area without any regrets. Beacrox was with him as a guard. Beacrox asked a question because they were heading toward Kale's crew's tents that were quite far away from the celebration. I just need to stand guard outside of the tent. Yes, I will be sleeping. That will be the official story. It really was easy to talk to Beacrox. He didn't need to do any unnecessary explanations. That was why Kale had gathered the three others into his room. Of course, he needed to crouch to look at the three of them. An, Hong, and Rayon were all sitting on the ground. Did you find him? An and Hong started to smile. We have a good feeling about where he may be. We know approximately where he is. They were very excited. Kale had already changed into another outfit. He then looked toward Rayon and started to speak. To the Liege's room, please. Rayon covered Kale, An, and Hong with invisibility and flight magic before avoiding the gazes of the other people and arriving at the 20th floor of the magic tower, the Liege's room. Since all of the alarm magic devices were already broken and only a guard was left at the entrance of the magic tower, it was not very difficult. Tunka had been adamant that as many people as possible took part in the celebration. He was oddly useful in times like this. What a. Ha 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 ha. Laughter and clapping, as well as even singing, could be heard echoing throughout the night. Kale could see the soldiers and citizens all gathered by a bonfire and dancing around. They seemed excited to be celebrating for the first time in a while. Kale put his magic bag on his waist before looking toward the kittens. The kittens slowly started to guide Kale through the magic tower. They moved stealthily, living up to their reputation as members of the Stealthy Cat tribe, while Kale followed behind them down the stairs. He could not use any magic device since they would leave some evidence of being used. However, Kale then started to frown. He stopped exactly on the 15th floor stairs and asked, "Where is he?" This was how the novel had described Mueller. Which wall would it be? Where would Mueller be? Hong wagged his red tail as he answered. The first underground level. Damn it. Kale had selected the wrong spot to enter. Kale held back his sigh before quietly using the sound of the wind and picking the kittens up in his arms. He then spoke to Rayon. Follow me. Kale's body moved very quickly down the stairs. Tap. Tap. It was very quiet, such that the guards outside would not be able to hear it. The magic tower's layout was 20 stories above ground and 3 stories underground. Hey, amazing. We got down here in an instant. You are weak, but as fast as my claw, human. Kale listened to the compliments of the three, who averaged only 7 years of age, while he stood outside the stairs to the underground levels. Around here. Yes. The kittens were saying that they could smell a rat. However, even they could not know the exact location. Kale had read the novel, so he could open the secret door as long as he knew the location. It really described a lot of useless things. The Birth of a Hero took time to describe all extras and passing characters with at least one line of description. Kale only knew the location because of this. Kale took out a small steel rod from his magic bag. An and Hong flinched and looked toward him, but he did not care as he started to tap the wall and walk down one step at a time. Ding. Ding. Where could it be? Ding. Ding. The red-haired man started to mumble as he walked down the staircase that was lit up by glowing rocks one by one. Kale was feeling good that he would be able to save Mueller who, in the novel, was caught before almost starving to death and had to watch as the non-mage faction destroyed his family's bodies before they killed him. Ding. Ding. However, the kittens and dragon following behind him did not look so good. At that moment, Kale took another step down and hit the wall. Dong. Found it. It looked just like the rest of the walls in appearance, but the inside of this wall would be different than the rest. Kale started to smile. He took out a magic stone from his bag and touched the wall. Kale was quite focused, as it required paying attention to a lot of details. There is a spot on the wall with 5 holes in the shape of a star. Kale managed to find the 5 holes in the shape of a star. He then put the magic stone at the center of those 5 holes. It was at that moment. Creak. A small noise could be heard as the wall moved and absorbed the magic stone. Kale took a step back. Creak. An odd noise was made as the wall slowly started to open. A very small person could be seen inside. Kale tried to give a friendly greeting as Mueller became visible. But something was off. Why? The very small coward was shaking intensely while having a pale face. It was as if he had seen a ghost, no, a homicidal maniac. It was different than what Kale had expected when he decided to be the hero who saved Mueller. Wah, hiccup. Mueller was even hiccuping. Kale tried to smile as gently as possible and greeted him. Hi. However, this only made Mueller shake even more. On, Hong, and Rayon all looked toward Mueller with pity. Kale was confused. Why is this punk like this? Chapter 74, Different Than Intended, 6. Kale looked toward On, Hong, and Rayon. What is going on? He asked the 3 of them with his gaze, but the 3 just sighed and shook their heads. Suboob. Kale could still hear Mueller continuing to cry. Why was he crying so much? Kale turned back toward Mueller. Both the dwarves and the rat people were very short. Having received both sets of genetics, Mueller was smaller than both dwarves and rats. He resembled the dwarves in fairy tales, having very cute features that would make almost any adult have the desire to protect this small person. However, this did not apply to Kale. I feel so bad for him. On and Hong wagged their tails before approaching Mueller with pity in their eyes. Mueller started to shake even worse as they got closer. He was crying even louder now. I feel so bad for him. Kale internally snorted at On's words. There was no need to feel bad for him. Mueller was 30 years old and lorded over the others as part of the family that helped develop the magic tower. He knew about the magic tower's last line of defense, but did not use it because that would have meant revealing himself to Tunka and his crew. He was so scared that he just ignored his father's last wishes. 1. If it wasn't for that, there was no way that the mage faction would have lost so badly. Of course, this was actually beneficial to Kale. Although he looked like a young and cute boy based on his appearance, inside of that body was a 30-year-old man who knew the ways of the world. He knew that his own life was what mattered the most. Naturally, Kale preferred such a person. Kale was tired of seeing a grown-ass man continuing to cry. He decided to stop the good guy act. Hey! Mueller flinched at Kale's voice. He started to shake again after seeing the steel rod in Kale's hand. He felt like this was the end of his life. Plop, plop. Kale placed some things on Mueller's arms while he was still crouching inside the wall. It was a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk. He had taken it out of his magic bag. Mueller's eyes started to shake. He cautiously looked up at Kale only to see a slightly annoyed expression. Eat it. Mueller quickly took a bite after hearing what sounded like a command. Kale had an odd feeling while watching Mueller eat the bread that got drenched in his tears. He seems to be useless. He had a bad feeling about this. Mueller looked like a totally useless fool. He was supposed to have the dwarves' technical skills and the rat's stealth and meticulousness. This combination was said to have given him the potential to become the greatest developer and constructor. But why? Thank you very much. Why does he feel like such a doof? Kale had a bitter taste in his mouth. However, On, Hong, and Rayon all looked toward Mueller with pity and approached him. They were trying to be his shield, as it looked like he was afraid of Kale. However, contrary to their intentions, Mueller was unable to even taste the bread he was chewing. 2 purebred cat tribe kittens and a dragon. At that moment, he heard a noise that brought chills down his spine. Ding! Ding! Kale tapped the wall with the steel rod. There was no reason behind it, he was just randomly tapping. He had a bad feeling about Mueller, but decided to take him anyway. The Hennetis territory had a lot of sculptors, as well as skilled artisans of all styles. There were especially many artisans involved in construction. It was because they had a lot of quarries. That was why Mueller would be useful. Do you want to live? Cale's low voice echoed throughout the staircase. He started to get annoyed with Mueller, who looked like he was ready to cry again. Ding! Ding! Cale calmed himself by tapping on the wall with the steel rod. He thought about how he probably needed to be gentle with Mueller since he was such a coward. Cale put on a gentle smile as he asked Mueller. Should I save you? Mueller vigorously nodded his head. It was so energetic that the breadcrumbs started to fling off of him. Cale was satisfied with his energetic response and started to speak in a relaxed manner. Then you have to listen to me. Got it. Why, yes sir. Eat your bread first. Mueller quickly started to eat the bread. Cale was satisfied with the speed and casually asked. You know where the Magic Tower Liege's treasure room is, right? Plop. The bread in Mueller's hand dropped to the ground. Cale gently added on. You dropped your bread. You should pick it up. Mueller quickly picked the bread back up. He was still crouching inside the wall with Cale, Hong, and Rayon surrounding the entrance to the inside of the wall. I know that you know about the secret room. The real room for the Liege of the Magic Tower. The room on the 20th floor was not the real Liege's room. The Magic Tower had more to it than meets the eye. Mueller's eyes turned chaotic. How did he know about the room? It was something that only the Liege of the Tower and the members of the developer's family knew about. At that moment, Mueller heard Cale's voice once again. You also know how to get into the 4th floor of the basement, right? Cale could see the shock in Mueller's face. The Magic Tower was known as having 20 floors above ground and 3 floors underground. Cale started to get an odd feeling after seeing that Mueller was looking toward him with fear, wondering how Cale knew about all those secret places. Cale felt like he had become a criminal, taking a hostage and threatening them for information. He had no plans to do that. In fact, his goal was to save Mueller and give him a safe place to stay. Cale started to smile and console the shaking rat person. First of all, I will at least let you live if you do as I say. He naturally had no plans to free Mueller. He needed to take him back home and put him to work. Cale could see that Mueller quickly responding. Anything, I will do anything you tell me to do. The rat and dwarf mix halfling sounded like he was desperate. Good. Cale responded to Mueller's desperation. Mueller's eyes were still shaking as he looked at the men who brought the scary cats, cats that were even scarier because they were pure-blooded cats, as well as the black dragon with him. Then eat the bread and guide me to the 4th underground floor. But you need a magic stone to go dash dot. Cale took a bag out and threw it toward Mueller before he even finished his sentence. It was a bag filled with many magic stones. Mueller quickly finished eating the bread that was still drenched in his tears. He then had to go down to the 3rd underground floor with Cale's group surrounding him. The stairway to the 3rd underground floor. In front of it was only the door to the 3rd floor and no other stairs heading downward. However, Mueller took a magic stone out and approached the wall, eventually revealing a mechanism on the wall. Creak. A cave was revealed accompanied by the noise. It was the pathway to the 4th underground floor. You go in first. Mueller mechanically stepped forward after Cale ordered him to do so. Cale was excited as he headed down the inclined pathway. The cave was dry without any humidity, and there were light stones keeping the path lit. The 4th floor of the basement. This was somewhere that only the Liege of the Tower, the mages who were secretly experimenting down below, and Mueller of the developer's family knew about. Cale walked down the path for a while to find a small door. There is an alarm magic device. Rayon stepped forward as Mueller stood there mumbling. Once Rayon lightly waved his paw, the small door opened. Naturally, there was no alarm that went off. Mueller was shocked, but Cale did not care as he stepped in through the door. Found it. He had found the first treasure. What was hidden in the Magic Tower? The biggest secrets were the 2 research projects that the Magic Tower was conducting in secret. The names of the research projects were simple. A mana storage device that used the principles of ancient powers. The reason for developing magic resistance. A research that Harrell would desperately want to acquire, as well as research that would take away the citizens' greatest advantage, were both held here. Wonderful. Kale could see the files under layers of security inside 2 large circular bins. The citizens who respected ancient power, and Harros who hated magic but also wanted to be able to use magic. How great would they have felt if they had found these research documents? But something like that will not happen now. These now belong to Kale. Kale approached the large orb located in the middle of the 2 circular bins. He could see a seed resting within a fluid inside of this transparent orb that looked like a giant egg. Human, that looks interesting. Rayon approached the egg and squished his face onto the glass in order to observe the seed inside of the fluid. Kale approached Rayon and patted his back as he asked, "Do you want to try raising it?" "Human, is that okay?" "Yes. But it is mine once it is done growing." "Deal." The young 4-year-old happily accepted a deal where he would do all of the work only for someone else to benefit from it. Kale had a satisfied smile on his face as he continued to speak to Rayon. "Let's pack up everything in here." "Of course. I am curious about everything." It looked like Kale should create a lab for Rayon in the future. Kale started to smile, knowing how much the seed and the research material were worth. "Mueller." Gasp, "You even know, my name." Kale approached Mueller, who was hiding at the entrance without coming in. Mueller looked back and forth between the dragon that made the documents and the large egg disappear into another dimension, and Kale, who was approaching him. He could not help but shake. "Let's go to the liege's room now." "Why, yes sir." "Rayon." "What is it, human?" "Set an alarm device here and a few magic traps." The 4th floor of the basement would be revealed once the magic tower was destroyed. Tunka and the non-mage faction would become even stronger if they found the items that were down here. Of course, Kale did not really want them to get stronger. Although they will perish faster this way. But that was not Kale's problem. Kale just blankly watched as Rayon happily created some magic traps. Other humans cannot take all of the interesting things in here. I need to make it so they die the moment they step in here. Kale watched the excited 4-year-old with satisfaction, but Mueller's face continued to turn paler. Kale didn't care about Mueller's current mental state. Instead, he waited until Mueller resealed the room that was now filled with Rayon's magic traps before he grabbed the back of Mueller's neck. The liege's room. That sentence made Mueller respond while still remaining curled up. "We need to first go to the 20th floor." An and Hong jumped into Kale's arms. Mueller, An, and Hong all shared the space in Kale's arms. Mueller could feel Hong's front paw on his back and felt like he was going to die. That made him develop the courage to say the following. I can walk, But before he could finish speaking, he needed to close his mouth because they were moving very quickly. Kale had used the sound of the wind to quickly rush up to the 20th floor. Mueller staggered before trying to stand once they got back up to the 20th floor. He needed some support as he seemed to be dizzy, leading on to give him some support. Thank you very much. Mio. An gave him a smile, but Mueller started to shake as he avoided eye contact with An. He then started to speak after seeing Kale's gaze that seemed to be telling him to explain how to get to the secret room. There is actually another floor in the magic tower. Is the 21st floor the real liege's room? No, we do not call it the 21st floor. Then what do you call it? The magic tower's liege's room. That was a room that the non-mage faction did not ever manage to find. Kale only knew about it because of something that was written in the novel. Kale heard Mueller's voice in his ear. The 0th floor. We call it the 0th floor. Get it ready. Yes sir. Kale watched the now quick and no longer crying Mueller with satisfaction. The moment a smile ended up on his face, Mueller's movements became even faster. Although he looked like he was shaking a bit, he was fast after receiving the unique traits of both dwarves and rats. Oh. Kale let out a small gasp of admiration. Boom. I didn't expect it to be here. Mueller moved some things on the floor of the liege's room. All sorts of devices popped up and Kale could hear the sounds of gears turning. Finally, once Mueller used a magic stone, a pretty loud noise echoed in the liege's room. Boom. However, the loud noise of the celebration allowed Kale to not have to worries. Nonetheless, he was soon full of confusion. Mueller, explain. Yes, sir. There was no change at all. Mueller started to point, not at the room that still looked the same, but somewhere else. It is over there. Over there. Kale looked toward where Mueller was pointing. It was the window. It was the large window that Kale had looked out of earlier in the day. You just have to jump out. Out the window. Yes, sir. Then you will be at the 0th floor. Mueller raised his head to look at the owner of the shadow that covered him. He could see into Kale's eyes. You know what happens if you've lied, right? The steel rod shined in the light. Kale looked toward the shaking Mueller, who nodded his head and started to smile. He then picked Mueller up. Ego, what are you doing, sir? You told me you would let me live. Kale ignored Mueller's cries. Instead, he looked toward Rayon and the kittens before looking out the window. Kale sighed while looking at the 3 pairs of eyes that were staring at him. You first. What? Mueller was thrown out of the window. However, they did not see Mueller fall to the ground. Kale quickly followed behind Mueller. Kale did not need to experience falling down 20 stories. Tap. There was a platform right underneath his feet. I guess it is magic. The real Liege's room appeared as Kale made his observation. At the same time, he could hear the children's voices from behind him. Nuna, I can't tell what I am looking at right now. Hong, my eyes are fine, but this is weird. Oh. Rayon just had a single word of admiration. Kale started to smile. Gold. Jewels. Magic devices. Money filled the very wide 0th floor. The entire room was shining and filled with things that would be worth a lot of money. It really makes you think about a dragon's lair. Kale headed toward a pile of magic devices. None of the items in this room were cheap. All of the magic devices were decorated with jewels, making it obvious that they were made for nobles or royalty. The entire room was filled with items like this. The Liege of the Tower did not use these devices, even as they faced death. That was because using it like that would not be for himself, but for everyone in the magic tower. Kale covered his face with both of his hands. He could see the slacker's life through his fingers. Ha 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 ha. Kale did not hold back his laughter. He let it all out. Mueller watched Kale for a bit before looking around the Liege's room that he had known about for a while, but was seeing for the first time. He then stealthily reached out and grabbed the golden brooch that was closest to him. Meow. But he heard a chilling sound as soon as he grabbed it. An and Hong were wagging their tails while watching him. The black dragon also took a step toward him. Mueller quickly let go of the golden brooch in his hand. The 30-year-old rat could not do anything. On the other hand, Kale had a wide smile on his face as he looked toward the children. We are rich. Listening to Kale's calm voice that was very different than Kale's current expression, An, Hong, and Rayon all started to smile. A jovial feeling, similar to the one down below in the celebration, filled the room. The rat watched all this with fear in his eyes. Chapter 75, A Good Person, 1. After safely getting out of the magic tower, Kale ran into Beacrox, who was still guarding his tent. Beacrox pretended like Kale did not exist, and Kale also did not say anything as he entered the tent. Mueller was, naturally, with him. Kale let go of Mueller and sat down on the couch. Even without Kale saying anything, Mueller kneeled in front of Kale. Although there was no need to do that, Kale didn't care and just got straight to the point. I will give you a warm bed and a safe place where you will definitely not die. And, eventually, I will also give you your freedom. Really? Yes. Kale crouched toward Mueller, who was still kneeling. First, I will let you leave the Whipper Kingdom. Mueller's pupils turned cloudy. He was afraid of both the citizens and other mages. Just leaving this place would make him happy. Kale casually put a brooch on Mueller's collar. It was the golden brooch that Mueller tried to take earlier. There was no way Kale did not see it happen. Mueller's face turned pale. I will also give you treasures like this. So, you'll be able to do a good job with whatever I ask, right? Yes, yes sir. I will definitely do a good job. Then create a blueprint for a castle and a ship. Excuse me. Mueller was said to have the potential to become the greatest developer. What Kale wanted was for him to develop things. Something along the lines of the magic tower is fine. He needed a safe sweet home and a strong method of transportation. How should I make it? Mueller's question made Kale think of his family crest. The golden turtle. There was something that came to mind when he thought of a ship and a turtle. Kim Rock-soo recalled the great turtle ship of Korea, but chose not to say anything about it. All he wanted was a ship for transporting and safety. The turtle ship of Korea with all of its exciting history was not necessary for him. Our family crest is the golden turtle. You figure it out from there. Mueller will take care of it. Although he didn't know what the end result would be, Kale made sure to be stern with Mueller. Work hard, as if your life depends on it. Hong, keep an eye on him. Mio. Surveillance is fun. Mueller was weak against children. In fact, he was very weak against children. I will work hard. Kale listened to his voice as he thought about how he was satisfied with today's operation. He could hear the citizens singing by the bonfire. The celebration was still going on even though it was close to midnight. It was going to be a loud night. The celebration continued until early in the morning, but it was calm after that. However, time still continued to flow during the calm. Are you feeling better? Kale just waved his hand at Chief Harrell's question. SOSO. Kale was always at the best condition possible thanks to the vitality of the heart. Isn't it all of you who need to worry about your health? Harrell and the rest of the chiefs looked tired. Billows was the same way. I am not weak. Tunka, who was drunk in the corner, was the same as well. Kale ignored Tunka and continued to speak to Harrell. Things progressed faster than expected. There was no point to draw it out. Just one day was all it took to make the deal for the magic tower. Although it could have taken a long time, trades always progress faster when one side is in a state of urgency. Makes sense since you are all in a rush, right? No matter what they did, the non-mage faction, which was a collection of the poor, was always going to be lacking money. The royal family would have given all of their money to the mage faction, and there was nothing inside the magic tower that was worth anything. But it wasn't like they could sell the magic devices in the kingdom, since that would only bring down their reputation. But most importantly, Harrell probably wanted to get rid of Kale as fast as possible. Did you get a chance to read through the contract, young Master Nim? I read it as soon as I got it. The total amount was slightly more than 10 billion gallons because it included some of the nearby land. Don't worry. I will destroy it within a year. The contract stated that, although Kale purchased the magic tower, he will also destroy it within a year. He would also not move the magic tower building to another location. He would also not gather any mages under the Kale Henadis name. I really can't understand you. Tunka glared at Kale like he was someone who came to show off his wealth, but Kale just shrugged his shoulders. I just wanted to own the highest view after the Empire's bell tower. Tunka looked toward him with disbelief, but just pushed the contract to Kale as if he did not want to think about any more complicated things. Just sign it. I promise to spar with your subordinate hillsman today. Muhahaha. Kale's expression turned stiff as soon as Vice Captain Hillsman's name was brought up. The Vice Captain was very good at socializing. He had started to talk to the citizens about cooperation. Choi Han had reported how surprising all of it was to witness. You just have to stamp here. Harrell handed an ink pad to Kale. At that moment, Kale and Harrell made eye contact. Harrell gazed into Kale's eyes like he was trying to read Kale's intentions, but Kale just smiled back. Harrell probably did not want to sell the magic tower because he was suspicious. However, he had no choice since they had a lot more to gain from selling it. It was difficult to ignore such gains. Here, I stamped it so you do it too. Tunka refreshingly, and, if we want to be mean, stupidly, stamped his thumb on the contract without any hesitation. Kale also stamped his thumb on 2 copies of the contract. He then put his copy inside of his pocket. It was now Billows's turn. I, Billows Flynn, as a member of the Flynn Merchant Guild, will serve as a witness and the intermediary for the transfer of funds. Tunka nodded his head and reached his hand out and Kale responded to shake his hand. Let me know if you need my help to destroy the magic tower. I can always help destroy that dirty building. Sure. You can feel proud that you made a deal with us, who will go on to do great things. Kale made eye contact with Tunka, who put some more strength into their handshake. We will leave a mark in the history of this continent. You can go around saying you know of me. Ha ha ha. History my ass. Well, being defeated does go down in history as well. The contents of Volume 5 will soon end. Kale didn't know what came after that. I look forward to it. Kale just responded respectfully to Tunka's words. The contract was finished. Kale left the chief's tent and headed back to his own. Billows naturally followed behind him. As soon as Kale entered the tent, he knew why Billows had such a perverted smile on his face. Kale took the golden plaque out of his pocket and slightly turned it around. With a click, the top of the golden plaque opened like a lid. Oh! Billows couldn't help but admire it as a stamp of the royal crest appeared. What are you looking at so amazed? Kale laughed at Billows before using the stamp on a note. This stamp with the royal crest would disappear after he used it twice. Kale passed a magic bag over to Billows, who was looking toward the golden plaque with greed. Isn't this the bag I gave Dash? Open it. Billows opened the magic bag that he had sold to Kale. Wow. He could see many magic devices that have been shrunk inside of the bag. All of them were magic devices for the nobles and royals. Billows then heard Kale's voice once again. You will receive at least a few more of those bags in the future. Slowly start to sell them after about a month. Billows clenched onto the bag and cautiously asked. How much do I get? 30%. That much. Billows could not hide his shock. It wasn't that 30% was large, but the Kale that he knew was pretty thorough when it came to things like this. That was why he thought, at max, he would get 20%. Especially since these magic devices were no longer available for sale. Leader of the Merchant Guild. Kale's voice accurately landed in Billows's ear. The position that you wanted. You need to quickly take that position. The north and the sea routes will soon be flipped over. Another war. Don't tell anyone else. Why would I share such precious information? Billows carefully put the magic bag into his pocket. Please feel free to give me whatever you want in the future. Sure. If possible, stay in contact with your uncle as well. His uncle, Odious Flynn. The man who was in control of the Roan Kingdom's northwestern underworld. Why my uncle? It would not be long for the Black Dragon, Rayon, to get his revenge. There's a reason. No need for you to be curious. I understand. Billows did not ask anything else. Instead, he handed Kale a magic video communication device. It was a precious item that Billows had worked hard to acquire, but Kale just took it and lightly tossed it onto the bed. Seeing Kale acting like his normal self, Billows started to exit the tent. Next time, I will contact you via video, young Master Nim. Sure. Kale ordered On and Hong as soon as Billows left. Bring the children here. Mio. A few moments later, Kale looked toward the children that On and Hong had brought before he started to speak. The duration is. He stopped mid-sentence and let out a sigh. He was frowning as much as possible. Hillsman. Yes, sir. The vice captain looked like a mess and smelled like alcohol after enjoying the celebration until the wee hours of the morning. However, his condition seemed to be fine. According to Beecrox's report, Hillsman was arm in arm with the citizens and enjoying himself as he got back to his tent. Did you enjoy the celebration? Of course. I have made a lot of friends. Maybe it was because Hillsman was the jealous type, but he was really a social butterfly. Will it be okay to send such a guy with Locke? Kale had some concerns, but there was nothing else he could do at this point. He looked toward Locke, the wolf children, and Hillsman as he returned to what he was saying. The duration is 1 month. Kale was planning on starting his deal with Locke now. He opened up a map on top of the table and pointed to a mountain at the southern end of the Whipper Kingdom. Mount Yelia. You just need to go find the item I tell you to find there. The ancient power this time was one that was embedded in an item. I'm young Master Nim. Yes, Vice Captain. I heard about that mountain before. It has a very high summit, and the peak is said to be covered in snow all year long. I also heard that it is one of the top 3 most dangerous mountains on the continent. And Kale looked toward Locke instead of Hillsman, who could not answer. Can you do it? Yes or no? I can do it. Locke answered without any hesitation. He was still timid and naive, but he was much different compared to when he had first met Kale. Maze. Yes, sir. All of you do not need to go up to the peak. Just support Locke from around the base. Maze and the children exchanged glances before responding vigorously. Yes, sir. We will definitely show you a successful completion of the mission. Ah, no need to be so passionate about it. Kale waved at them before speaking to Hillsman. You are the guide. Guide the children well, feed them well, and make sure they get their rest. So, I don't have to climb the mountain. Hillsman scratched his head as he started to mumble. I am a bit afraid of heights. What the hell was this kind of guy doing being a vice captain? Kale suddenly had a lot of questions about the Henitus Family Knights Brigade. Do what you want. Yes, sir. I will be a great guide and guard for the children. Oh, young Master Nim, where should we return to? Kale pointed to a location at Hillsman's question. Over there. Yes. Are you sure you did not point to a wrong spot? Hillsman's eyes could not move away from where Kale was pointing. It was one of the Western Continent's 5 forbidden regions. The Path of No Return. It was located in Urim, a rainforest that rained throughout the year. This path in that forest was one where many travelers went in and never came back. Nobody knew what happened to the people who entered. It was located at the border between the Whipper Kingdom and the Western Continent. Kale was pointing to that rainforest. Vice Captain, there is a small village called Hoik Village by the Path of No Return. It is a small village, as well as the only entrance into the Path of No Return. It was a very small village located at the most southern part of the Whipper Kingdom. That village rested at the entrance of this rainforest with no exit. Come over there. The Path of No Return. In about a month from now, the Queen of the Jungle will be running amok inside of Urim with her subordinates. Kale was planning on being her guide at that time. Choi Han, who had been standing to the side, approached him and asked. Then is Hoik Village our next destination? Yes. Kale was thinking about the last stage of the first step toward the luxurious slacker life, the money step, and started to smile. Once he took care of this business with the Queen of the Jungle, he would return to the Roan Kingdom to take care of Rayon's revenge and some trivial things before building a sturdy house. We can head there right away once things here are done. Kale was meticulously preparing for the future beyond Volume 5 that would soon arrive. 3 weeks later, Kale arrived at Hoik Village. It was sprinkling. Why are there so many gravestones here? Kale looked toward the gravestones that started from the entrance of the village before responding to Rosalind's question. Hoik Village is a village that was created by the families of the travelers who went in and never came back. Their desperate pleas for their loved ones to return, as well as the hope that they would someday return, had led to them remaining here and building this village. Those people who entered the Path of No Return had entered for many different reasons. However, with them never coming back, their family ended up moving as close to them as possible. However, people will eventually give up. Once those hopes turned into despair, well, those gravestones are the results of that. The gravestones were placed for their loved ones who they decided would never come back. Hoik Village was more of a village of sorrow rather than a village of hope. Kale looked toward the large forest beyond the village. What a sad place. What are we doing here? Kale casually responded to Choi Han's question. Hope. Excuse me. We will be the hope of the jungle. Chapter 76, A Good Person, 2. The Jungle. Choi Han was confused at the unexpected response, but Kale did not respond. He just walked forward and cut through Hoik Village. Other than the gravestones all around Hoik Village, there was not much of anything else. It was a very quiet village. Young Master Nim, your umbrella. Hoik Village, the village that was next to Urim, the forest where it rained more often than not, also rained quite frequently. Kale used the umbrella given to him by Hans and headed toward the end of the village. Hans and a couple others followed behind him. It's here. The Path of No Return. The only entrance into the path appeared in front of Kale's eyes. Maybe it was because of the sprinkling and the cloudy sky, but the path into the forest looked dark and creepy. The path of no return. There was a large slab with those words on it at the entrance. Choi Han let out a moan. Kale was observing the scenery in front of the slab. Even on this rainy day, there were people waiting at the entrance of the path of no return while wearing raincoats or just letting the rain hit their skin. These were the people who still had hope for the return of their loved ones. Kale made eye contact with one of the old men standing there. The old man's eyes suddenly opened wide. "Do not go." The old man said that to Kale before stopping to lean on the slab and looking toward the forest. Kale just quietly watched the old man. "Young Master Kale." Rosalind approached and called his name. She looked at the old man, as well as the rest of the people who were waiting at the entrance, with a sad gaze. At that moment, Kale started to move. "Old man, it is raining. Don't catch a cold." Kale put his umbrella next to the old man who was just standing in the rain and motioned to Hans. "Young Master Nim. Umbrella. What about me? Share with Beecrox." Beecrox and Hans made eye contact and Beecrox started to frown. Hans kept his mouth shut and handed his umbrella over to Kale. However, Kale did not have a reason to take that umbrella from him. "We can share mine." Rosalind's umbrella started to cover Kale as well. "Thank you very much. Let's go." Kale just briefly thanked Rosalind before turning away from the entrance to the path of no return. The rest of Kale's group followed him while the villagers at the entrance observed Kale's group for a bit before looking back toward the forest. "Hans." "Yes, young Master Nim. Go find an inn. Although there are a lot of inns, I'm sure there aren't any really good ones, so just find a decent one." Hoik village had a lot of inns compared to its size. However, all of these inns were very shabby since the people coming here to look for their loved ones didn't have much money. Just why is it that everybody enters that Urim? Kale sat down in the first-floor restaurant of the inn they picked before he answered Choi Han's question. "For hope." Hope. There is a legend about the path of no return. Even though it was infamous for no one ever coming back, people still went into it every so often. It didn't matter if the old man tried to stop them like he did with Kale's group earlier. Supposedly, a dragon lives in the path of no return. What the hell are you talking about, human? There are no dragons here. The only dragon around you is me. Rayon, who had been quiet, suddenly shouted into Kale's mind. Kale knew that there were no dragons here. He was someone who had read the novel. That dragon will grant the wish of the human who find his lair. Whether that wish is to become rich, cure an incurable illness, or even make someone have a happy life. It will grant any wish. A dragon cannot do that. Dragons are great and mighty, but we are not gods. What nonsense. Rayon's complaints were the truth. However, such legends had a tendency to shake the minds of the desperate. That legend is what draws people in. Kale could see a rare frown on Choi Han's face. Choi Han probably did not like it. With his personality, seeing the atmosphere of this village, as well as people like the old man from earlier, it probably made him sad. Then wouldn't it be fine if we just destroyed this forest? That was why Choi Han had no issue saying such a vicious thing without giving it any thought. Kale just pretended to not hear him. Of course, a fire will start in this forest. That was why, by the end of Volume 4, the 5 forbidden regions of the Western continent ended up becoming the 4 forbidden regions. Wouldn't it be fine to just light it on fire and burn it down? As Choi Han's suggestions became even more dangerous, he could hear Kale's voice. We just need to show that the legend is a lie. Then there will be no reason for them to go into the forest. At that moment, Beecrox let out a sigh as he entered the inn. Young Master, I am back. Many people were behind Beecrox. Young Master Nim. I, Hillsman, am back. Young Master Nim, we're here. The wolf children and Hillsman all looked shabby as they entered the inn. Beecrox took out a pair of white gloves after looking at this dirty group. Young Master Nim. Locke was the last to enter the inn. He approached Kale and handed him a magic bag. However, Kale blocked Locke from giving it to him, before turning to speak to all of them. You all worked hard. Go get some rest. The group all started to smile. After saying that, Kale reached his hand out to Locke. Locke cautiously handed the magic bag to Kale once again, and Kale started to speak. As part of our deal, the item inside is mine. Yes, sir. There was not an ounce of hesitation in Locke's voice. Even though Locke probably knew that it was an ancient power, he did not show any greed for it. Kale opened the magic bag to look at the contents before speaking to the group. I will be entering that forest. What? Meow. Huh. What? What is it? Kale looked around after getting such an unexpectedly strong response from everyone. Choi Han was frowning even deeper as he let out his disbelief. Kale Nim, you really? Rosalind's eyes were extremely wide as she stared at him, and the kitten started to bang the table. Furthermore, Rayon was going crazy. I will be going as well. Weak human, you listen to me. Do not go without me. This is a warning. If I get angry, it will take less than 5 minutes for me to destroy this forest. 1. Listening to Rayon's vicious warning, the last person Kale saw was Hillsman, whose eyes were shaking. Young Master Nim, are you talking about the path of no return? I heard that nobody comes out of ... Who said that? Kale continued in a very quiet voice so that the innkeeper at the counter could not hear. That is not the case for me. His hand reached to the side where An and Hong were oddly sitting apart from each other. Kale reached his hand between the two of them and touched the curled up and invisible Rayon. Kale petted Rayon and An before continuing to speak. I'll be fine as long as I have them. An's eyes turned wide as she looked at him. Kale made eye contact with An before he started to whisper. An, do you know why the path of no return is so dangerous? I dunno. Fog. An's pupils started to become cloudy. Kale was actually somewhat surprised after he first met An and Hong. Purebred cats all had their own specialties. Of them, poison was very rare. However, fog was even rarer. If Kale was asked to pick the rarest existence in his group, he would pick An over Rayon. Kale shared the secrets of Urim with the little girl who could control the fog. The inside of the Urim is filled with fog. He then started to speak to Rayon. There is something in the fog that makes both people and mana chaotic. That is why it is difficult to use magic in there. It is a power that is much stronger than mana disturbance tools. This forest was completely covered in this fog. That is why a ground path is difficult. However, Kale would be fine as long as he had An and Rayon. These extremely rare existences by his side allowed him to plan to make a deal with the Queen of the Jungle. I can do anything I want in there as long as I have the two of you. An's tail was wagging and Rayon's wings seemed to be fluttering, as there was a small gust of wind across the table. Early the next morning, Kale was standing outside of Urim. Naturally, the kitten An was in his arms. Following his order, nobody else was there to watch him enter. You will die if you go in, you cannot come back. The old man from last night seemed to have spent the night there, as he weakly warned Kale from next to the slab. Someone important to this old man had probably went into the forest, desperate to find the dragon of the legend as well. Old man, I will break the legend and come back, so you can wait for me if you want. Kale smiled at the old man's shaking eyes before he entered Urim without any hesitation. He walked quickly and soon found that he could not see very far. It was the fog. The fog had surrounded him. It does look like I will need to use about my front paw's worth of strength in order to use magic. Human, you need to be at least at my level to use magic in this fog. Rayon, you really are amazing. Yes, I am great and mighty. But what is the Queen's wish? Rayon, who had heard a brief explanation last night, asked for more details from Kale, who responded without any delay. Putting out the fire in the jungle. Fire. Latana, the Queen of the Jungle. She was the ruler of this wide southern territory that was larger than even the Empire. She's someone who is pretty similar to Tunka. She never showed any weakness to the strong while she was very weak to the weak. The reason such a person was secretly in this forest was because she was desperate to find a solution. Instead of explaining to Rayon and An, who were tilting their heads in confusion, he started to say something else. His expression was serious. Starting from today, I am a good person. Why are you suddenly introducing yourself? Rayon looked toward Kale with confusion. On also looked at him with a gaze that seemed to be asking why Kale was stating something so obvious. This made Kale at a loss of words for a moment, but soon Kale finally started to speak to On. On, the path. Got it. On's eyes sparkled before her front paw started to move. The fog moved away following the movement of her paw. The fog in here is interesting. It doesn't seem like regular fog. It is similar to a poisonous fog. Listening to the curious On's words, Kale walked deeper into the fog, even though he could not see anything in front of him. The fog did not disperse, even when it rained. Kale brushed some rain water off of his raincoat. Can you see the path through the fog? I can see it. Kale followed On's directions into the forest. He seemed very much at peace, as if he had come for a stroll. It would be great if we could meet her today. Kale was hoping to meet Latana, the queen of the jungle, today. It soon became night time. Latana, the woman who had earned the title of the queen of the jungle, was looking out the cave. It was dark. She could only hear the sound of the rain. I'm sorry. Your Highness, there is no need for you to apologize. Leader, no need. Her 5 subordinates all urged her, saying that she didn't need to apologize, but Latana could not help but have a bitter smile after looking at their condition. They had already been stuck in this path of no return for 2 weeks. Although there were no monsters or enemies, they could not see anything in this foggy forest and their supply of food was going down. They didn't dare to eat any of the unknown plants of the forest, so they had been surviving off of 1 meal a day for the last week. Latana knew what was scaring her subordinates. We might die here like this. For warriors like them, there was nothing worse than dying without doing anything like this. Why did I? Latana was angry with herself for the first time. That damn fire. She had to come here because a portion of the jungle was burning from a fire that did not spread but instead just continued to burn in that specific section of the jungle. She touched the glass bottle in her chest pocket. A portion of that fire was inside the bottle. If nothing else works, I will just have to burn my way out of here. Although she shouldn't damage the forest, that was not as precious as the lives of her subordinates and those waiting for her back home. She looked around the cave that they happened to find. They would need to spend the night in this cave tonight. Latana calmed herself down as she decided that she would need to make her decision soon. It was at that moment. Rustle. Latana grabbed her spear. She sensed someone outside the cave. Rustle, rustle. Drip, drip. She could hear the sound of the rain and some footsteps. Someone was headed their way. The gazes on the faces of Latana's subordinates who were around the fire started to change. Rustle. The sound was getting closer. Soon, a shadow appeared by the fire. Swyish. Who are you? One of her subordinates' spears pointed toward the person's throat. Well, you see. They could hear the common language of the continent. The fire slowly started to light up the man's face. I saw some light and headed over with joy. A red-haired man was looking at the speartip and putting on an awkward smile. The fancy yet gentle-looking man gulped while looking at the speartip and cautiously asked. If it is okay, may I sit by your fire tonight? Meow. There was a wet kitten in his arms and both of them were shaking. My raincoat ripped and we are so cold after getting hit by the rain. The shabby-looking man and kitten with a ripped-up raincoat. Latana was cautious, but soon she started to speak. Get him a blanket. She couldn't help her mentality of a queen, who was taught that she needed to protect the weak. The red-haired man, Kale, was shaking as he approached Latana's group. Weak human, beware of catching a cold. But why is your expression different than usual? Are you very sick? Rayon's voice, which required him to use a paw's worth of strength, reached Kale's mind. However, Kale was hiding his plot from Rayon, as he simply received the blanket and responded with a gentle smile and a respectful attitude. Thank you very much. He didn't look like his trash self, but an upright noble. The kitten looked toward Kale with disbelief. Kale was slowly setting the bait. Chapter 77, A Good Person, 3. They were taking the bait. All of the members of Latana's group had odd expressions on their faces while they were watching Kale, who slowly walked to a corner of the cave and sat down. Thank you for giving me a place to stay tonight. It was a gentle and respectful tone. Naturally, Kale was the one who said it. Latana shook her head at the average-looking red-haired man. It is only normal between travelers. You seem to be cold from the rain, so please rest by the fire. However, her subordinates remained wary of him. Even if he looked shabby from the rain, he was still a stranger. What rain? He wasn't hit by rain at all. I did it with warm water. Rayan was complaining about what Latana said. Kale had ripped his raincoat nearby the cave while Rayan used warm water and temperature-maintaining magic on him before he moved toward the cave. Kale patted On's back for acting her part well. Mio. On seemed to be anxious as she looked up at Kale. Latana was looking at the two of them with a stealthily sharp gaze. He doesn't seem like a normal person. Latana didn't sense it when her subordinate had pointed his spear at Kale earlier, but taking another look at Kale, the person in front of her had a different feel than a traveler or adventurer. He seemed healthy, but his posture and walk made it clear that he had not practiced any sort of martial arts. However, he did not seem like he was a mage nor any other type of strong individual either. Her intuition was spot on. You seem as strong as the tip of my claw again. Kale's body was surrounded by the dominating aura right now. While Latana was observing Kale, Kale was also observing Latana through the corner of his eye. The people of the southern jungle, otherwise known as the Southerners, were known for their bronze skin and firm physique. Having a natural location like the jungle as their home, they were very close to nature. Close to nature. That closeness to nature developed into a very different culture when comparing the Whipper Kingdom citizens and the Southerners of the jungle. While the Whipper Kingdom developed a sense of survival of the fittest and struggle, the Southerners developed a sense of win-win and leader and followers. An awkward silence filled the cave. The voice that broke the silence was Kale's casual voice. The rain seems to be getting stronger. We should leave the forest tomorrow, right, On? The expression on the man's face as he gently spoke to the kitten was as warm as the fire. However, On was looking at him with disbelief. Why are you acting like this? Rayan was confused as well. Latana and her subordinates all looked toward Kale with stiff expressions. Latana was able to make a guess based on what the men had just said. Mr. Dash Dot. You can just call me Kale. Yes, Mr. Kale. Latana could see that the men had a magic bag on him, but did not have a sword or anything else, as if he had just come into the forest for a stroll. He also seemed to know his way around. He had an odd atmosphere around him. She suddenly thought of something. Is he a dragon? She recalled the legend about the dragon that would grant your wish. The legend did not say anything about the dragon's appearance nor how it showed up. Latana knew her thoughts were probably wrong, but she could not help but become full of anticipation. It was at that moment. Latana made eye contact with this man named Kale and could see him start to smile. I am not a dragon. Ah. She flinched as she let out a gasp. She could see Kale brushing back his wet red hair that had fallen onto his face. However, I do know the way in here. How? Latana and her subordinates, who had no issues around the complicated and irrational jungle, were lost in this forest. However, this man in front of them knew the way in here. Seeing Latana's confusion on her face, Kale started to smile and answered back. This child is from the cat tribe. Kale petted On with a gentle gaze that seemed to fit the gaze of a saint. I happened to run into this child in the slums on a rainy day like this in the past. He looked out the past. He seemed to be nostalgic about the day they had met. On recalled that day as well and knew that it was not such a nostalgic moment. However, she kept her mouth shut and her tail started to shake with uncertainty. This child, On, can control the fog. What a rare power. Latana thought about the fog covering Urim and let out her admiration. It is. I learned about this place while traveling out from my territory. I read in an ancient text that this place was controlled by the fog. Latana turned her gaze from On to look back at Kale. She sensed elegance in his actions and tone the longer she spent with him. He was definitely at least a noble. That was why I headed to this place with this child. Kale's eyes started to sparkle by the fire. Latana and her subordinates could see it as well. Kale's calm yet passionate voice filled the cave. We came here because we thought that we could use our power to give hope to the people who lost their way, as well as their family members who are desperately waiting for them. That wasn't it. Rayon was mumbling to himself while On was just quietly wagging her tail. Kale had a tiny smile on his face after seeing Latana's gaze starting to change. Thankfully, I was right. We were able to see the path once On controlled the fog. He quickly explained the secret of the fog. He explained how it could make someone hallucinate and cause mana disturbance as well. I see. Latana couldn't hide the bitterness in her heart. The legend, it probably does not exist. If it was fog and mana disturbance, the legend about the dragon causing this was definitely a lie. Disappointment filled Latana and her subordinates' faces. However, at the same time, Latana thought it may be for the better. It was a much better situation now than when she was debating whether she had to set this forest on fire. Then is it possible for us to ask you to guide us to the exit when you are leaving tomorrow? Of course. We have to help each other in times of need. Latana's gaze became more gentle and warm toward Kale. He was as good of a person as he looked. She probably felt that odd aura around him because he was such a good person. Kale then had a disappointed look on his face as he looked toward him. I'm sorry. I'm sure you had a desperate wish as well. That is okay. There is nothing I can do about it. I am just glad that I do not need to set the forest on fire. Fire. That word made Kale's eyes sparkle for a moment before it quickly disappeared. Fire. It is a very scary word. I can feel how much struggle you must have faced since you are a southerner who treasures nature. Do you know about the South? Not much, but I have read about it in books. I enjoy traveling and love beautiful sights. Oh, I see, weak human. Kale felt the chills after hearing Rayon's response but continued to speak as brightly as possible. I read about how beautiful the jungles, mountains, lake and everything else is. Now that we will be able to get out of this Urim, I plan to visit there in the future. I see. Latana was full of disappointment, bitterness and sorriness. She could not lie or feign ignorance to this person who was looking forward to the beautiful scenery of the jungle. Her subordinates' faces turned gloomy as well. Unfortunately, the jungle you will see once you get out of this Urim will not be beautiful. What do you mean? The jungle was about a day's worth of travel from Urim. It was quite wide as it took up the majority of the south. However, why would Latana have come to this Urim? It was because it was close to the location of fire. There is a fire in the jungle. What? Then shouldn't you put it out right away? It is a fire that doesn't spread but also one we cannot put out. Seeing Kale's chaotic gaze, Latana started to explain about the fire in the jungle. One day, Section 1 of the jungle, the section of the jungle by this Urim is Section 1, a sudden fire started there. Water, magic, incantations, nothing seemed to work on it. We were very worried, but it just remained in Section 1 without spreading elsewhere. She started to mumble with a bitter expression. I'm not sure whether that is good or bad. It was an odd fire. However, Kale knew the identity of this fire. A fire that could not be put out through magic or incantations. The answer was alchemy. Alchemy was more scientific than magic. There was an empire that was very developed in alchemy and nothing else. The Magaru Empire. The empire with the alchemist's bell tower was the one who caused this fire. To be more accurate, it is the imperial prince of the Magaru Empire. The imperial prince who was worried about Latana who managed to unify the 15 sections of the jungle had stealthily caused this fire. However, no secrets could remain secrets forever. By the end of Volume 4, Latana, who caused a fire in Urim to escape, finds out that the imperial prince is responsible for the jungle's fire and partners with Tunka, even though his philosophy of survival of the fittest was not a match with theirs, to take on the Magaru Empire. The queen who rides a black panther instead of a horse led her warriors to protect the jungle. But that isn't my problem. Kale did not want to take part in that at all. He was just going to take care of the fire and get paid for it, before taking care of a few other things and returning to the Henadis territory. It was because he did not want to see the imperial prince of the Magaru Empire. He's not a good person. Crown Prince Elberu and the Empire's imperial prince were similar people. That was why Kale could consider him to be a peer, but it was a bit different. Crown Prince Elberu cared about justice. That was why it was easy for Kale to talk to and put him to use. However, the imperial prince was not like that. He only cared for himself. He was also very sly and insidious. He was similar to Kale but different. Kale pushed away his thoughts about the imperial prince who wanted to take control of everything at the center of the western continent and quickly moved the muscles of his face. He made himself look concerned. Is it a big fire? I have never seen such a large fire in my life. It shoots high up into the sky whether it is day or night, making it feel like there is an explosion every day. Then it is probably difficult to approach as well. Yes. Neither animals nor humans can get close. Just getting close makes it feel like we will get burnt. Terrible, sigh, it is very terrible. Latana looked toward Kale, who seemed to truly feel disappointment about it and felt grateful. It was rare to find a citizen from the center of the continent who cared so much about the South or nature. However, we will do our best to put the fire out. I see. She could see Kale, who was nodding his head, suddenly fall into a state of deep contemplation. However, it did not last long. It was very short. However, his eyes seemed to be full of determination. Sigh. He brushed his face after suddenly stopping and sighing. However, he ended up looking at Latana with determination once again. Please take me to the fire. Excuse me. The Latana Kale knew about was someone who was weak against the weak and tried to give anything she could to the good. She also returned any wrong at 10 times the pain while trying to return any grace at 1,000 times what she received. Kale had a very genuine expression on his face as he started to speak with a purposefully slightly shaky voice. I believe I may be able to put out the fire. What? Rayon started to shout in Kale's head. Weak human, what are you doing? You are very weird today. You are weak. What are you trying to do? Kale did not care as he still had a determined expression on his face. I believe I will be able to put it out. Chapter 78, A Good Person, 4. Silence filled the cave once again. Latana turned away from Kale in order to look toward her subordinates. She was trying to see if she had heard correctly. Her subordinates had the same expression that she had. Mr. Kale, may I ask you to explain? Latana, who had been leaning on the cave wall, sat up straight. The leather armor had dried with the fire, showing off her toned warrior body. I am a citizen of the Roan Kingdom. You are from the northeast. We are people who work in the jungle as warriors. I see. I am from a small territory in the corner of the Roan Kingdom. Kale scratched his cheek as if he felt awkward listening to Latana call herself just a warrior, and cautiously continued. I am from a small noble family. Thanks to that, I do not lack the funds to travel. I also have a crew that travels with me. A crew? Yes. I came into the forest alone with On, but there are people who trust and follow me. Latana and her subordinates who valued the leader and followers philosophy looked toward Kale a bit more gentler now. Anyways, as I traveled around, I was able to come across a fateful encounter. A fateful encounter? Kale had a bitter smile on his face and started to scrunch his eyes like he was recalling a difficult memory. Yes. I was caught up in an ocean whirlpool and barely managed to get out. Once I got out, I found this fateful encounter inside a cave. At that moment, I was able to find an injured person and have them. I was relieved to know maybe that was the reason I ended up getting caught up in the whirlpool. He suddenly put on an embarrassed smile. I'm sorry. That wasn't the story I was trying to say. It looks like Mr. Kale has saved a lot of people. Latana looked toward the calm cat tribe child On before looking back at Kale. This respectful and courteous noble did not even act arrogant because he was a noble. No, I just couldn't walk by without doing anything. He seemed very modest and good. Anyways, there was a power I managed to gain at that time. What power? Latana realized Kale had gotten to the point and asked. Fire suppressing water. It is able to suppress any and all fires. Latana and her subordinates' eyes all became cloudy. It definitely sounded different than your average water. And that would be accurate. This water was different than your regular water. No matter what kind of fire it was, if it had the word fire in it, it could suppress it. Originally, Tunka would have found this fateful encounter and used it as a base to develop a body that cannot be burnt. However, Kale was not afraid of getting burnt because of his vitality of the heart. It would hurt a bit, but the vitality of the heart would let him recover right away. Why would he use something like this in addition to that? Instead, Kale had put that water into the absorbing necklace that Locke had brought back. Kale cautiously added on. However, there is a limit to how much I can use, so I am not sure if it will be enough. Ah. Latana let out a gasp. She opened and closed her mouth a couple times before finally asking. It sounds like a precious power. Is it okay to use it for us? Kale worked hard to prevent the corners of his lips from moving upward. There definitely was a limit to how much he could use. It is limited to putting out a fire about the size of the entire Western continent. As long as Kale was not putting out a fire that burned across the entire Western continent, he had enough to last him a lifetime. However, it wasn't like he had lied to her. How should I address you? You can call me Lena. One of her subordinates flinched. Kale pretended not to see and called out Latana's fake name. Miss Lena. Yes. There is no precious or not precious when it comes to powers. I believe the important thing is how you use that power. Latana and her subordinates could see that Kale's eyes were clearer than ever. If I can use this power of mine to save the nature, the animals, the plants, as well as people and their livelihood, I believe I definitely need to use it. Latana subconsciously started to clench her fists. Her heart was also beating quickly. Of course, now that it has recognized me as its master, I need to personally go there to use it. It might take some time and be burdensome. Do you need to go into the fire to use it? I think inside the fire might be difficult, but I probably have to at least get near it. Kale could see Latana starting to frown. Both gratitude and sorriness filled her heart. It was the same for her subordinates as well. Of course, two of them were still wary of Kale, but even they were grateful to Kale. Kale then launched the final blow. I will be very happy if my power can be of assistance. I want to save and help everyone. This isn't the weak human I know. No, you are a good person, but still, this isn't like you. Anyways, saving someone is a great deed. The 4-year-old became chaotic before coming to a conclusion. On the other hand, An just yawned and looked away from Kale. Thank you very, very much. Kale put a gentle smile on his face in response. However, his eyes were coldly observing Latana and her subordinates. Latana had come to the forest, leaving behind the jungle and people she needed to protect, with a single ray of hope. They had been here for 2 weeks with no results. To them, Kale was no different than the dragon of legend. How could we repay you for your gratitude? Gratitude? No. I have not done anything yet. I just have a feeling that I was drawn into the forest for this exact reason. Latana admired Kale, who did not show even an ounce of greed. He really seemed to be a good-natured person. Pay back revenge at 10-fold, while paying back gratitude to the best of her abilities. Mr. Kale, I still want to repay you for your gratitude somehow. You are going to guide us and go to the fire to use a limited power. We cannot accept it all without giving anything back. No, I'm really okay. Kale put on an awkward expression. He then seemed to contemplate something for a bit before clapping his hand like he had thought of something. Ah. He looked embarrassed as he started to speak to Latana and her subordinates. I read about Section 1 in a book about the jungle. I read that the combination of the vibrant jungle and clear coastline makes it very beautiful. It said that the sunset there was amazing. I remember thinking that it would be great if I could have a villa in Section 1 as I read that. Section 1 was the section that was currently on fire. The eastern shores of Section 1 were filled with rare materials like gold. In the novel, a shaman from the eastern continent will end up putting out the fire in about a month. The shaman goes over to the shore to gather some sea water when he happens to find a gold ore. That gold ore was just the tip of this magic stone mound. It wasn't a full mine, but just a pile of buried magic stones of the highest quality. The shaman keeps it a secret before gathering it all and running away. May I go over to Section 1 to look at the sunset once the fire is out? Latana was suddenly at a loss of words. The beautiful Section 1 shoreline. However, that place was on fire as well. The men in front of her should know that, even after the fire is put out, the sights there would be terrible. However, the fact that he didn't ask for land or money and just to go visit there was surprising to her. That was why she was the first to bring it up. I don't think seeing it is enough. Excuse me. I will build a villa there for you. If you are not satisfied with Section 1, I will build it anywhere in the jungle for you. No, there is no need for that. That's too much. I really am okay. Kale had to work really hard to keep his lips from forming a smile. No, I will build a villa for you. Ah, well, if you insist. Kale put on an expression of, there's nothing I can do, as he answered. If I am able to help you put out the fire, the villa is too much. May I just ask for a small plot of land where I can build a villa? Latana could tell that, although Kale said he was from a small noble family, that really may not be the case. Based on the material of his clothes, the size of his magic bag, as well as his elegance, he definitely was someone who could easily buy things like villas or land. Yes, of course. I will give you as much land as you want. In fact, I insist. I will only be satisfied if you do so. Great. Kale held back his cheer and let out a sigh as he nodded. Yes, I will make sure to do so. He made it look like he had no interest in the land of the jungle, but had agreed since Latana insisted. That made Latana decide that, if everything goes well, she would give more than what Kale wants to accept in order to repay this debt of gratitude. Kale knew very well about Latana's nature. Kale made eye contact with An as he continued to pet her. Your goal is the land, right? An's gaze seemed to be asking that question, but Kale pretended not to notice as he opened his magic bag. Would you like something to eat? All of you look a bit famished. Ah, that. Kale took out the food he had Beacrocs make for him from the bag. He knew the most basic way of turning someone to your side. Someone who feeds you is a good person. That was how he had earned Choi Han's trust as well. Kale touched the blanket that Latana's subordinate had handed him as he continued to speak. You can treat it as the cost of this blanket. Let's share a meal together and move tomorrow. The atmosphere went from casual to very friendly. First, we will return to the village where my crew is at and then cut through the forest to the jungle. Please go on and eat. Kale continued to lay it on thick for Latana and her subordiantes. You can't use any strength to save the jungle if you don't eat. Kale's words made Latana and her subordinates think about the people waiting for them. As for Kale, the magic stones were waiting for him. Latana looked toward the food that was still fresh and warm because it had been in the magic bag and grabbed the fork that Kale handed her. She then started to mumble. The legend was not very far away. Excuse me. Kale had heard the whole thing, but pretended like he did not hear a word. No, nothing. This is delicious, Mr. Kale. I'm glad. Latana and her subordinates were able to have a relaxing and full night for the first time in 2 weeks. An peeked at Kale, who watched them with satisfaction before letting out a sigh. Mr. Kale, this is amazing. Right. An is amazing. Kale peeked at Latana and her subordinates, who were following behind him. Looking at the 6 of them under the sun made it very easy to see that they were strong warriors. There were 2 different types of warriors in the southern continent. 1. Someone like Tunka was the fighter type while the northern knights were more the warriors. The people of the jungle were a mix of the 2. They were both good at fighting and at training their martial arts or weapon arts. Miss Lena, we are almost at Hoik village. Kale could see Latana and her subordinates tighten the raincoats around them after hearing his words. They had suddenly ended up crossing the border, so they were covering themselves up as much as possible with their dark blue raincoats. Latana was especially making sure to cover her black hair. The royal family had pitch black hair. Since she was on a smaller side for a southerner and was working hard in order to hide her identity, it was difficult for anyone to tell that Latana was a strong warrior. However, Kale knew the truth. 1 level under Choi Han. She was much stronger than Tunka. 1 level under Choi Han meant that she was very strong. Once she got on her Black Panther and used her spears, nobody was able to catch her. She was like the Reaper of Death to her enemies, even in broad daylight, as she moved around in the jungle that was dark from the shadows of the forest. That was how she had become the queen who unified the jungle. The head of the jungle needed to both be empathetic and strong. They needed to protect their tribe. We are almost there. Kale could feel Latana's group behind him as he started to walk forward once again. An was controlling the fog to open up a path for them. The fog started to move away. Ah! Latana's subordinates let out a gasp. They could feel that they were finally getting out of this path of no return. Kale just continued to walk in silence. Latana and her subordinates trusted Kale even more as they watched him leisurely walk down the path. Drip! Drip! The rain fell on the new raincoat that Kale had received from Latana. We are here. Finally, the fog lifted and they could see the entrance of Hoik village. He had returned. Ha! A gasp-like laughter escaped from Kale's mouth. Meow. Han jumped out of Kale's arms and started to run. Meow. Hong ran toward her as well. The siblings ran into each other and started to rub their cheeks against each other. Kale had his arms crossed as he watched the two kittens before starting to frown after seeing the people standing next to the slab. Why are you all out here in the rain? Hans, Choi Han, and Rosalind were all waiting for him. None of them responded. Instead, they all just pretended as if they didn't hear him. Young Master Nim, as the deputy butler, I could not go to sleep. Kale Nim, it is cold. Who are the people behind you? Young Master Kale, did you have a good trip? Kale uncrossed his arms and headed to them. He stood in front of them and started to speak. I'm back. Kale didn't want to see the smiles on their faces, so he turned around. His gaze then fell on the people who were staring at him. It was the families of the people who had gone in and never came back. Kale headed toward the old man who was sitting next to the slab. It was the same one who had warned him about going into the forest. He then crouched down next to the old man. The old man's eyes were shaking in disbelief. Kale confidently spoke to the old man. Old man. Kale, no, Kim Rok-soo, knew what it was like to wait for something that was never going to come back. He knew that his parents were dead, but, at one point, he had hoped that they would come back if he waited long enough. Kale looked directly into the old man's eyes. There is no dragon. The legend was no more. The old man's eyes slowly started to tear up. The old man quietly looked down at the ground before nodding his head over and over. Kale walked past the old man and the others before casually adding on. I saw some clothes and skeletons in the forest. I can bring them for you if you'd like. That was the only thing Kale could do for them. He returned to his crew and started to speak to Choi Han and the rest, who were looking back and forth between him and Latana's group, who were wearing a different style of clothing. Pack our stuff. He pointed to the forest. We are heading to the jungle. The fire that enveloped the entire section 1 of the jungle. It was time for Kale to suppress that fire on his own. Chapter 79, Flustered, 1. All of Kale's crew gathered at the entrance of the Path of No Return 2 hours later. They were not the only ones there. Kale ordered Hans. You get a list of names. Yes, sir. Hans looked toward Kale before moving away to speak to the villagers. Hans would probably find out the kitten's secrets during this trip. At Kale's gaze, Maze, the wolf children, and Hillsman all got in a single line. They seemed as disciplined as a knight's brigade. Aunt will take us over and then come back with Hong. After that, all of you will be responsible for going in and finding the remains inside the forest. Maze and the wolf children vigorously nodded their heads. While Kale was watching them with satisfaction, a very timid voice came from below him. Why, young Master Nim, why am I included? I need to create the blueprint. Muller was shaking between Kale, Hillsman, and Beacrox while looking up at Kale. Kale felt like Mueller really was a mess. He couldn't leave such a mess alone. Just do as I say before I get angry. He didn't want to have to grab Mueller's neck or hold him to the side again. Kale didn't know how Mueller understood that statement, but Mueller quickly turned pale and nodded his head. Mueller was carrying a large bag filled with papers and pens for the blueprints. Kale headed over to Latana, who was a bit away from him. He had a gentle smile on his face. It looks like we can head out now. I'm sorry for making you wait 2 hours. No, it is okay. Latana answered like that while observing Kale's group. She had expected Kale's knights to have average strength because Kale was average and had no martial arts training. A very interesting person. However, that was a severe misunderstanding. There were a lot of strong individuals around Kale, as well as an individual whose strength she could not see through. Although they were too far away from Kale's group to be able to listen to their conversation, Kale seemed to be very charismatic when he was talking to his crew. On the other hand, Kale's crew all had varying reactions after seeing how gentle Kale was with Latana, but they did not let it show. Kale had already told them in advance. Match my demeanor. All of them would do well since they are all sharp people. On, let's go. Meow. On took the lead while everybody else followed. Excuse me, Kale Nim. Choi Han approached Kale, who had been walking in the front with On. He seemed like he had something to say. Kale made sure Latana's group was a bit away behind Rosalind before looking back at Choi Han. What is it? Is the jungle fire they're doing as well? It was a cautious yet sharp gaze. Kale immediately knew who the they that Choi Han was referring to were. The secret organization that caused the Plaza Terror incident. He was talking about them. No, it is not them this time. Originally, Choi Han would run into the secret organization at the capital and then lightly in the Breck Kingdom. However, it did not seem like he had run into them while he was there. I see. I thought it would be another bit of information about them since you happen to know about it, just like the terror incident. I still remember my vow. Kale reminded Choi Han once more. I will let you know when I find out their identity. So don't worry. Yes, sir. Choi Han could see Kale cutting through the fog like his usually confident self. He opened and closed his lips a few times before finally starting to speak. Don't try to do all of the hard stuff on your own. What is he talking about? Kale looked toward Choi Han with disbelief. It was at that moment. I agree with that as well. Rosalind, who had been in the middle in order to keep Latana's group away from Choi Han and Kale, started to smile. Kale found it hard to understand the two of them. Hard stuff. I really don't know what you are talking about. I don't plan on doing any of the hard stuff at all. Why would I do the hard stuff when there are so many people I can use around me? Kale looked toward Rosalind with confusion as he answered. However, Choi Han and Rosalind just looked at each other before starting to smile, thinking that Kale never changes. Those expressions made Kale feel significantly bitter. However, he just stopped asking and started to walk again as time was of the essence. Finally, after walking for the entire night, except for a short break, they were able to head out of the path of no return the next day. My gosh. Kale's crew were all shocked once they got out of the forest. Black smoke. They would need to travel another day to see the jungle, but there was a lot of black smoke approximately where the jungle should be. They could also see some of the fire, as they were now on a clear plain. Latana bit down on her lips. It was not because it was her land. It was because she was thinking about her family and her people who were still struggling because of the fire. Let's hurry. She turned her head in order to look at Kale. This journey was probably difficult for this noble. He definitely looked like he was brought up without any difficulties. Yes. We will guide you from here. However, Latana still needed to hurry. That was why she was thankful. 5 of her subordinates stepped forward once she motioned. Latana was in the vanguard. The head of a tribe always had to stand in the front. It might be a rough trip because we need to move as quickly as possible. That is fine. It was a gentle, yet stern response. Let's go. Latana started to walk instead of saying thank you. They headed toward the black smoke. After traveling for another day, the exhausted group could see the large fire right in front of their eyes. To be specific, they could also see many tents surrounding the large fire. However, none of the members of Kale's crew paid attention to them. What kind of fire dash? The wolf boy Locke subconsciously took a step back. It was like a volcano had erupted and covered a mountain. The fire was shooting up as high as a mountain. None of them had ever seen such a sight. Ahem. Choi Han subconsciously let out a fake cough and took a breath. It was difficult to breathe. Even the extremely strong Choi Han, who had lived in the forest of darkness for years, had never seen such a massive fire. Section 1 of the jungle. This fire covered the entirety of that large section, and was as tall as a castle. Nature. The power of nature was not something that the human mind could comprehend. That fire. The mage, Rosalind, looked toward Latana's group and asked. Her eyes were shaking in disbelief. It made sense. It was currently raining right now. The jungle was in the season where it would rain multiple times a day as they headed toward the summer. It was their rainy season. The sky was cloudy and it was raining. However, the fire remained the same. It remained a source of light in the cloudy day. That was the weirdness of this fire. Yes, it is this one. Latana looked toward the fire with a bitter smile. As it had been until now, the fire remained in Section 1 without moving at all. The jungle is dying. She could see Locke taking a step back. She bit down on her lips. This scary natural disaster that was beyond human comprehension brought fear to everyone. Even the Southerners were too afraid to approach it and could only stay near the boundaries of the jungle. Latana turned toward Kale, who was quietly observing the fire. Would he still try to approach the fire after looking at how strong it was? She did not dare to say, "Let's go." It was at that moment. "It's hot." She heard Kale's voice as he took off his raincoat and jacket. After taking off the simple, yet luxurious jacket that made it obvious that he was a noble, he pulled up the sleeves of his white shirt. He then turned around to look at Latana. "Let's go. I think I will need to go as close as possible to the fire. I may even need to go past the boundary." He seemed as relaxed as if he was on a stroll. Latana looked around to see Kale's subordinates looking as if they had expected Kale to act like this. She then turned around to look at her subordinates before looking back at Kale. "I will take you there. I can go on my own." Kale wanted to go on his own because he already knew how Latana was planning on taking him there. "No, it is dangerous." Latana turned her head around to see some people running toward them from the tents. "Your Highness. Our Queen. Leader Nim." She could hear them calling her from afar. Latana gently smiled to Kale, who seemed to be shocked at their calling her Queen. Of course, Kale was just pretending to be shocked. He was also shocked for real, but it definitely was not because Latana was a queen though. Wow, so big. A large animal was running toward Latana. Grrrrrrr. 10. The large black panther rushed over at Latana's calling almost as if it was flying. Latana easily jumped on the back of the black panther that stopped in front of her. Latana, the queen of the jungle, and her black panther, 10. Kale understood why this pair had the nickname of the Reaper of Death. The black panther, that was a very dark blue color, was at least the size of 2 or 3 adult men. She started to speak while sitting on top of the panther. 10 and I will take you there. At that moment, her subordinates who had run over from the tents looked back and forth between her and Kale. "Your Highness, these people are..." Latana did not answer the question right away. Instead, she looked toward the people who were slowly starting to come out of the safe zone after hearing that she was back. She could also see some animals as well. These were the people who used to live in Section 1. They were probably waiting for her. That was why she needed to come back with the dragon from the legends. "He is a dragon." "Excuse me." Latana smiled at her subordinate, who looked toward her with confusion. She then reached her hand out to Kale. "Please get on, Mr. Kale." Gore. Kale did not want to get on after seeing the Black Panther start to growl. The Black Panther, 10, was staring at Locke. At that moment, one of Latana's subordinates who were with Kale stepped forward. He explained to the rest of the subordinates in Section 1. "We escorted this sir here because he believes he can put out the fire." Can he really put out the fire? All of the shocked gazes turned toward Kale. Choi Han and the rest got in front of Kale to defend him. "Kale Nim, it is dangerous. I will escort you to it." "No need." Kale shook his head at Choi Han's question. "That heat will make you get burnt if you get close. It is dangerous. All of you just stay in the safe zone." They would just be baggage if they came with him. The fire did not need anyone else's strength to put out. "Miss Rosalind, shield please." "Sure." Rosalind sighed before putting a shield around Kale, Latana, and 10. Rosalind already knew about Latana's true identity, although Latana didn't seem to know about Rosalind's. Since she is the queen of the jungle, she will escort you there through the safest and best path. Have a nice trip, young Master Kale. I don't want to ride this Black Panther. Kale just needed to rush over with the sound of the wind. He continued to stare at Latana, whose hand was still reaching out to him, his crew, and the confused jungle people before sighing and grabbing Latana's hand. He then got on the Black Panther. He was scared of falling off, so he clenched onto the Black Panther's fur. "Let's go." Latana sat up straight before turning around away from Kale, who was looking at the fire that was off in the distance. She then crouched down and spoke to Ten. "Ten, take us to the fire." "Gore." Latana sat back up and the large Black Panther started to move. The Black Panther and black-haired woman rode toward the fire with the red-haired men. They soon crossed through the safe zone and toward the boundary. "Your Highness." "Ten. What is going on?" She could see the people calling out to them as they rushed past the tents. Everybody looked haggard. She bit down on her lips. "Let us go even faster." She could hear Kale's voice coming from behind her. "Ten, faster." Ten started to move faster in response to Latana's command. Kale's crew and Latana's subordinates followed behind them, but they were too slow. Rustle. Rustle. Drip, drip. The leaves, grass, and rain all landed on Kale's shirt. However, the dampness instantly disappeared. "It is enormous." Kale got off the Black Panther once they got to the boundary. He could feel intense heat from the fire. Sparks of fire were whirling around like hail inside of the boundary. "Imperial Prince, you crazy bastard." Looking at the fire in person made Kale realize that the Imperial Prince really was a crazy bastard. "This fire is weird." He could hear Rayon's voice in his head. Kale sternly spoke to Latana, who was approaching him. "Miss Lena, please step back." "But it looks like I will need to go closer to the fire." He would need to use about a third of the fire-suppressing water to put out this fire. Seeing it in person, he could tell that this was worlds apart than a normal mountain fire. "I'll need to use a good amount since I don't know the strength of the water in the necklace." He would just need to use more of it if it didn't work. Kale thought about it simply before speaking to the two who came with him. Latana and Ten would get in his way from here on. "Please step back." Latana could not respond after seeing Kale's stern demeanor. "Grr." At that moment, Ten pulled on her clothes to move her back. "Ten." Latana looked toward Ten with an odd expression. The Black Panther Ten did not run away from anything. Latana found it weird that such a child was telling her to step back and leave Kale here. At that moment, she heard Kale's voice. "It looks like that child trusts me." "Excuse me." The men with hair as red as the fire started to smile. It was a relaxed smile. "I will not get hurt. I will return after putting out the fire, so please step back and watch." "Well, you can always save me if it looks dangerous." With that, Kale entered the boundary without any hesitations. Latana watched him walk in before taking a few steps back. Ten crouched down and she got on his back. It was so that both of them could rush in right away to save Kale if it looked dangerous. Kale did not know about this as he got right up to the fire. "It would have been dangerous if I didn't have the vitality of the heart." The heat was intense. However, he did not feel any pain. It was because of the strength of the fire-suppressing water inside the absorbing necklace that could absorb any natural power, as well as his recovery thanks to the vitality of the heart. "Weak human, that fire seems like a crazy fire. It goes against the laws of nature." Rayon was loudly chirping in his mind, but Kale stood right in front of the fire before turning around. He could see Latana and Ten, as well as the tents in the distance. He could also see people approaching them from the tent. "I told them not to come." He was sure it was his crew. Kale clicked his tongue and opened up his arms. Drizzle. Crackle. Kale listened to the sound of the rain and the fire as he used the power of the absorbing necklace. "Oh!" A crying noise started to echo out from Kale. At the same time, the necklace started to glow blue. Kale could feel the power of the water inside the necklace as he closed his eyes. If the fire is like hail, then he just needed to create real hail. The water that suppresses and dominates fire. Kale generously took out a third of that water. Splayawawash. The water shot up from Kale's hand into the air. "Oh, oh, oh." The crying noise became louder as a giant wall appeared above Kale. It was a wall of water. He kept his eyes closed as he started to imagine a hailstorm. My gosh. Latana subconsciously let out a gasp of admiration. At the same time, 10 subconsciously stepped back. A large wave was being created in front of them. Watching this gave Latana the chills. Oh, oh. Drizzle. The rain and crying seemed to resonate with each other. The water that shot out was a dark blue color. The people rushing toward the boundary, as well as the people watching them from the tents, all stopped to blankly stare at this water wall. The fire in this area seemed like it was shooting up to the sky. The wave started to grow in size to match the fire. In the end, a giant wave that seemed like it could wipe anything out was created in the air. Kale opened his eyes and lifted up his head. Was 1/3 too much? Kale was a bit flustered. The wave that he created looked amazing and strong even to him. At that moment, he could hear Rayon's voice. Good idea. Let's just wipe this crazy fire out, human. Kale started to smile. Yes, let's wipe it out. Oh. The crying noise suddenly stopped. Boom dash. The large wave crashed to the ground with the blue water wall covering the fire and the earth. Chapter 80, Flustered, 2. A large hailstorm covered the ground. The fire-suppressing water ate up the fire, along with everything else. Kale Nim. Young Master Dash. The water also ate up Kale. Choi Han started to quickly move again. Rosalind used speed magic to rush past him first. They could not see Kale. The strong wave ate up everything without regards to friend nor foe. Sizzle. A large amount of water vapor started to rise up from Section 1. There was so much that you could see in front of you. That symbolized just one thing. The fire was being put out. Instead of the black smoke from earlier, white water vapor shot up to the sky. The wolf boy Locke just watched this with a blank expression. He looked down after feeling that his feet were getting cold. The large amount of water that had covered up Section 1 began to flow out toward Locke, and now the safe zone as well. However, the water that touched Locke's feet was no longer as strong as the wave. Ah. Locke turned his head after hearing someone gasp. It was one of Latana's subordinates who had been heading over to her. They were blankly staring at the water below their feet as well. The jungle people who were peeking out of the tents earlier, as well as the ones who were standing outside of the tents with curiosity, all were now standing outside. Drizzle. It was raining. They were all standing under the rain while looking at their homes. Sizzle. The water vapor was still rising up into the sky. They could not see in front of them, but they could also no longer see the fire. Why, young Master Nim? Locke finally came back to his senses. He also followed Choi Han and Rosalind and ran toward Section 1. Rosalind and Choi Han had already reached where Latana and Ten were standing. Latana finally came back to her senses once they approached her. She was already drenched in water. But she had definitely seen it. Kale Nim. Young Master Kale Dash. She had seen what had happened to Kale. The wave had swallowed Kale before it had consumed the fire. That man was the first to get pummeled. Ten. Ten immediately started to move after hearing her call his name. Ten started to move toward the boundary where the water vapor was rising. It was at that moment. Sizzle. Dry-izzle. Between the sound of the water vapor and the rain, a new sound could suddenly be heard. Sweesh. It was the sound of wind. This gentle wind that reminded them of the spring fluttered by Ten and Latana. That wind then reached Choi Han and Rosalind. That wind made the two people finally stop running. Ah, right. Ha. Rosalind let out a gasp-like laughter. She had become flustered and forgotten about it. She had not been acting rational. Once she rubbed her eyes, she could see a new sight. Kale Nim. Choi Han could see the gentle wind create a path through the water vapor. At the end of that path was a silver light. Choi Han knew what that light was. They could see a glimpse of Section 1 through the path created by this wind. It was black. They could also see evidence of things having been burnt by fire. They could see someone standing there on top of these burnt ruins. It was a man with hair as red as the fire they could no longer see. A large silver shield and wings were covering the man. Latana did not even notice that Ten had stopped, as she was mesmerized by the sight. Pot. The silver wings opened up before disappearing with the shield. Once it disappeared, the only thing left standing there was that man, Kale. Kale then started to stagger. Latana's eyes turned wide and the Black Panther, 10, started to move. Choi Han and Rosalind also crossed the boundary to approach Kale. Kale had put a hand on his head and was frowning. His head was full of Rayon's voice. I was enjoying the water and forgot the shield. That was why it was a bit late. I'm sorry, human. Kale couldn't say anything. He had been busy admiring the wave that he created that he had also forgotten about the indestructible shield. Ah right, shield. He only came back to his senses after hearing Rayon shout that, and so he had activated his shield as well. That was why he was holding his head that was temporarily smashed by that water bomb. I used too much of it for no reason. He was drenched and cold for no reason. I'm really sorry. I was not great. The 4-year-old's frustrated voice filled Kale's dizzy head as he quietly whispered. I still managed to live thanks to you. You weak human. I am an idiot. Kale wanted to stop Rayon from blaming himself, but he could not do so. It was because Choi Han, Rosalind, as well as Latana and Ten, were approaching him. Choi Han quickly started to support Kale. Are you okay, Kale Nim? Are you okay? Rosalind quickly used temperature management magic on the drenched Kale. Miss Rosalind, you know that I won't get hurt. Choi Han and Rosalind looked at each other after hearing Kale's casual voice. Rayon was with Kale, while Kale also had the indestructible shield. It was only now that the two of them remembered this. An embarrassed voice continued to speak. Why did you keep shouting my name so loudly like that? I had to come out quickly because of that. Kale started to grumble while fixing up his wet hair and clothes. He looked very calm. However, he was standing on top of a land that had been completely burnt to a crisp. Do I not have much affinity with water? CLE recalled what had happened when he met with Tyra last time. He didn't enjoy getting drenched every time he was around water. It was because he found wet clothes to be annoying. Kale moved away from Choi Han, who was supporting him, and stood up straight. It wasn't like he had gotten hurt. Thanks to the vitality of the heart, his condition was great. Let's go. He started to walk and Choi Han and Rosalind followed behind him. The two of them were smiling, but Kale didn't care much about it as he approached Latana, who was stiffly standing a short distance away. She had already gotten off of the Black Panther. Miss Lena. Latana could clearly see Kale after hearing his gentle voice. She had been in a daze, looking around at everything else once she realized that Kale was fine. The lush forest and jungle that started once you got out of the Whipper Kingdom. Section 1, a place that was so beautiful that they described it in books, was now completely burnt black. That sight made it difficult for her to breathe. Growling. Latana, who had been watching Kale, turned toward Ten after hearing him growl. Ten was looking at the black ground and the entire area that had turned to ashes and was rubbing his head on the ground. Latana bit down on her lips. At that moment, she could hear Kale's voice again. It looks like you should go. Excuse me. She could see where he was pointing to when she looked back toward him. Ah. She could see her subordinates and the jungle people and animals in the safe zone. She knew where she should be looking right now. She should be looking over there at them and not the black forest. She could hear Kale's voice again. It looks like there is nothing left for me to do here. She turned back around to make eye contact with Kale. He looked calm and gentle, yet strong. She had seen what he had done. The water vapor was still rising up to the sky. He was the one responsible for creating the water that put out this fire. She had been wrong. He was not a weak person. He was strong. How much of the power did you have to use? He had mentioned that there was a limit to how much he could use. Latana was curious about how much was left. I have a decent amount left. Although he was enjoying himself when he used it, Kale was feeling irked now that he thought he used too much of the power. His face subconsciously had a bitter smile on it. He didn't like that he had wasted some of the power uselessly. I understand. Seeing Kale working hard to smile and hide the bitterness, Latana looked toward her subordinates who couldn't cross the boundary, as well as the jungle people approaching them from the safe zone and started to ask. Mr. Kale, shall we go together? He was the hero today. He deserved the praise and applause for his actions. However, Kale's response was not what Latana had expected. Your Highness. Lena. She quickly corrected him. No, what they need right now is you, Miss Lena. They need their queen. Kale turned his head toward the safe zone. Latana turned her head as well. The jungle people who were getting drenched in the rain were crying in joy. Even though they could see the black ground clearly as the water vapor disappeared, they were hugging each other in joy. Kale felt tired just thinking about standing in front of them. That was why he wanted to just end it on a good note here. I believe this is the result of all of your persistence for the last 2 weeks. I do not wish to be the center of attention. That was what the drenched and pale man had said. I just want to go to that beautiful place and see the sunset. I really want to see that sunset right now. He wanted to just dig up the magic stones and leave. He had moved more than usual for this jungle situation. I am jealous of the Roan Kingdom. Excuse me. Kale did not hear Latana's words clearly, so he looked toward her. Latana started to smile and shook her head. It's nothing. Latana swiftly got on 10 and crossed the boundary line. Sitting straight up on the Black Panther, she was sitting higher than the jungle people, even with her short stature. She put some strength into her throat and started to shout. The fire is out. I'm sure that everyone here has seen it. Nature is fair like time. As time goes on, we will be able to recover our forest. So today will be a day we celebrate a new beginning. Roar. 10 shouted out like he was agreeing with Latana. Dryizzle. The sound of the rain filled the silence for a moment. Wah wah. The void was then filled with the cheers of the people. Even now, the water that Kale had created was rushing toward the shores of Section 1, putting out any small, remaining fires along the way. Human, you will catch a cold. Hurry up and go rest. Kale ignored Rayon's nagging as he was guided by Latana's subordinates. The place they took him to was a quiet and clean tent that they had quickly prepared for him. Please let us know if you need anything. I do not need anything. I just want to rest quietly. If possible, I would like to leave as early as tomorrow as well. The subordinates who had crossed through Urim to get to the jungle with Kale had expressions of disbelief on their faces. However, they still gave Kale a positive response. Yes, we will do our best to prepare whatever you need. Once the subordinates left, Kale looked around the tent. Choi Han and the rest were guided to other tents. However, there was someone who had followed Kale. Rayon. Rayon revealed himself after being called. TSK. Kale clicked his tongue. He picked up a towel and started to dry off the drenched dragon. Rayon had even forgotten to put a shield around himself while being mesmerized by the wave. Dry yourself, human. You will catch a cold. Kale snorted at the 4-year-old's action before scrubbing Rayon's face. Rayon just sat there while Kale dried him. Kale threw the towel to the side before using another towel to dry his hair and taking one of the orbs he had received from Billows out of his pocket. Connect. All right, human. Rayon seemed to be happy about something, as he connected the magic communication device without any complaints. Kale sat down on a wooden chair as the magic communication device flew in front of him and connected. A person soon appeared on the magic communication device. Huh? Why do you look like that? It was Crown Prince Alberu. You look like a drenched rat. Kale could see the mocking smile on Alberu's face as he put on the gentle smile he had put on for Latana. How about you not smile like that? As expected, it did not work on Alberu. Kale immediately put on his usual smile and leaned back on the chair. Alberu was used to this relaxed-looking Kale. Your Highness, the star of the Roan Kingdom, how is Marquis Stan's family? He had been out of contact for 3 weeks while he went to Hoik village. He had done a lot in these past 3 weeks. This was one of them. How? It is currently changing the person in control. Why are you so curious about it? At that moment, Rayon's voice filled Kale's head. Is it finally time for my revenge? Marquis Stan and Vignon. The things they had done to Rayon. In order for Rayon to completely overcome the trauma of his past torture, he needed to get revenge toward those who were involved in it. Kale had to hear Rayon's plans for revenge like a lullaby every time the two of them were alone. Dragons will never forget such shame. Rayon was looking to get compensation for his lost time and destroyed sense of confidence. That was the natural instincts of a dragon, the violent rulers of the world. Alberu observed Kale with an inspecting gaze. I'm letting you know because I am getting something in return for it, but I really can't understand why you are curious. It is only so that I can do things that you will like, Your Highness. Seeing Kale lie like it is nothing made Alberu snort. However, this was the truth. I am telling the truth. It would be good for Alberu as well. Alberu was feeling iffy about Kale's expression, but there was something he needed to do right now. That was why he started to speak. Hurry back to the castle. Yes, sir. Kale had no issue saying yes, since he was planning on going there anyway. Of course, Kale wasn't going to rush over. He was going to do whatever he needed to do here first. He chatted with the Crown Prince about a couple different things before ending the conversation. He then ate some food before falling asleep. Of course, he had to listen to Rayon's plans for revenge like a lullaby, as usual. The next morning. Miss Lena, I wish to go over there. Kale was telling Latana that he wanted to go to the shoreline. There was no reason for him to stay here any longer.